the draft budget to look at, so I'm kind of excited. I like the new format and whatnot, so we'll get going. Anyhow, please join me for the Pledge of Allegiance. I guess I should say call to order 1 o'clock.
Yeah.
Are you doing that?
Yeah, me too.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Okay, at this time, I'll open it up for public comment. Anybody have any public comment online or in here? Hi there, Kelly R. Anybody online? Nobody here for public comment. All right, moving on. Oh, we have somebody.
Is the little green hand not showing or?
Oh, is that Francisco?
Absolutely. Of course, you knew I
All
was going
right.
to be on here.
Absolutely. All right, public comment, go for it.
So I was looking to see how I could relate the proposals in terms of the budget items to the projections that we all were exposed to during all of the town halls that looked at each year as expenditures and revenues and how much we had to spend to produce all those revenues, et cetera. How do I link those together? Would be my question. And then
Go ahead.
then secondarily, the material talks about the support of the 21 strategic plan. I'd like to see or hear, obviously not in this presentation, but before the board gets to make its final say so, how all of these initiatives or efforts are linked to the 21-26 strategic plan that was pointed out by the writer of the materials.
Okay,
Thank you.
good questions, Francisco. And I asked some of those at our meeting yesterday. And I would say, let's get through the presentation and let's get through going through the budget line by line and revisit those questions after that. But I did ask those questions at our meeting yesterday. So after today's meeting, we're going to have another special budget meeting next Wednesday. So I believe if nothing else, those types of questions will be answered then if we can't get to them today.
That is correct.
Okay.
There are a couple slides in the PowerPoint that I'll be presenting that shows the link between the budget, proposed budget, and the rate study.
Okay.
There's a little bit of dynamics that go into that, and we'll get into that later. As far as how it links to the strategic plan, that'll be presented in the board workshop next Wednesday.
Perfect.
We're focusing on the structure, the changes, and the numbers today.
Right. So Francisco, stand by and.
I'm cool. I'm cool with that. Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you very much. Cool.
Okay,
Uh-huh.
excuse me. So off the top, you're going to talk about the change to the structure. Is that how it's going to be handled?
Director Underhill, I was not looking forward to this moment
Uh-huh.
because
You know exactly how I feel. How do I feel, Jeff?
you're going to feel even worse within the next 15, 20 minutes. But it all makes sense. Once I get through everything, it'll start to make sense.
Uh-huh. Okay.
Okay, so.
Show me.
So we're gonna move on to item number 2, approval of minutes. Bertha, are we good with those?
Yes.
All right, so we approve the minutes of April 16th. So now we're gonna move into new business, and I'm gonna combine item 3A, the report on the monthly financial reports for April. I'm gonna move that as part of the discussion with item 3C, which is our draft operational budget. Those will kind of come hand in hand because I'll be asking, looking at year to date. In fact, Jeff, I had asked yesterday at the meeting to get, hopefully to have gotten a report, just like our draft budget, but where it says adopted budget, I wanted to see year to date totals. Were you able to do that?
Not last night, but I
Okay.
will have it.
Definitely for the next
Yes,
meeting.
it will. I'll be working on that tomorrow.
And is there anybody that could potentially have it up on their screen? So for instance, if I'm looking at line item 1, 2, 3, 4, and I don't need the detail per se, like say fuel. So what I'd like to say is, where are we at year to date? So I know what our budget is. Are we under budget? Are we close at budget? Are we right on mark? Now, I suppose we could go to our
Yeah, because
the
it gives you the
report, but I
percentage.
didn't want to go
Yeah,
back
Understood.
and forth. I was hoping to have it all right there next to the budget.
I understand, and my apologies for not
Okay.
having that available today. Also, when we did look at year to date, the last numbers I put in are March
Oh,
31.
they're not April.
I understand. No, they're not April. So I have to go back and re-enter all that, and I will do that tonight and tomorrow morning and have it
For
as part of
Wednesday.
the budget package.
Perfect. Okay.
Yes.
But I mean, I can look at our report included in here if there's some that I
Yes.
actually need to see. I just didn't like that back and forth,
Sure.
you know, with that hunt and peck that I complain about.
And the detail does show year to date, but it's through March. And this is kind of what Kylie and I were talking about this, this morning. We're dealing with a very old Springbrook. It's not as if new Springbrook is bad. We're dealing with a very early version of Springbrook. And when we print out reports or download reports, it's not easy to download it into Excel. It's actually easier to print it out and do data entry. And that
Yeah,
exercise
but
of
data entry,
that
and error.
exercise of putting together the April numbers in there, because you got to do water first, then sewer, reconcile both, and then compare them to the whole district budget, make sure you got it correct.
well, let's,
That's going to take me
yeah,
a little bit of time, but
let's
it'll be
get-
part of Friday's budget package.
perfect. Okay, so with that being said, we're moving, combining 3A and 3C. So let's move on to 3B. Discussion direction regarding the annual standby assessments for Indian Rock Vineyards, West Point, Ebbets Pass, Jenny Lynn, Copper Cove, and Saddle Creek service areas. And this is yours, Jeff.
Yes, ma'am. This is an annual procedure we go through. Each year, we have to submit, your board has to approve the assessments that we have here. These are standby fees, and these fees have not changed in decades. They were locked in when Prop 13 came about. And it's just an annual process. These are for, in case of Indian Rock Vineyard subdivision, $10 per month for lots to which sewer is available, but not receiving sewer service. And you have it for West Point Improvement District, that's for water. Ebbets Pass Improvement District, that's also for water. And then we have sewer ones for, actually water and sewer for Jenny Lynn Improvement, that's water, Copper Cove Improvement, Saddle Creek Subdivision, and La Quintana. So we have a number of these assessments, and in totality, they're about 131,000, the same amount each and every year. It may move down a little bit as new homes are built on those properties, because they'll then go off the assessments, standby fees, and go become a actual customer.
Mhm.
And what we are asking today is for your committee to forward it, direct staff to forward it on to the full board at the next board meeting, which would be June 12th.
And you said there was no change.
No change.
Okay.
If we had to go through changes, it would have to go back to the voters. Prop 13
Uh-oh.
applies to it. So we just kept it the same ever since, I think it was 79, was it?
Mhm.
Prop 13
Mhm.
somewhere.
Well, we don't have to do any kind of
No.
study on this?
No,
No.
To make sure? Okay.
No.
I'm good with it if you
yeah,
are.
so am I. So we'll go ahead and
Move it.
forward it to the
Yes.
full board.
Okay.
All right.
Want to ask for public comment on this?
Yes, I do. Any public comment? All right, no public comment. We're
Okay.
good to, oh. Francisco. I see his box highlighted. Go ahead, Francisco.
So this is the $10 for bypassing an empty lot. Is that the one I'm on? Am I correct on that? The $10 a lot, or am I mistaken? That
No,
has
you're
to-
correct. It's per lot, and it's for those where water or sewer service is available through CCWD,
and they
except in
can't
the
put-
Ebbets Pass area.
Okay, and they can't put a well in those lots, right?
They can still put a well on there. These are lots that are unimproved without a home on them.
No, I understand that. I'm just saying
Well-
that they can make the decision to keep paying the $10 and still put a well on there.
That is correct, as long as.
Well,
it
they
goes through
have
the
to go through they have to get approval from the district, they have to get approval from the county. And then backflow prevention devices, all kinds of stuff would have to be done, right? But I guess it would be possible.
It would be possible, yes. There's just processes to follow.
Yeah.
Gotcha. Thank you.
All
You're
right.
welcome.
Thank you, Francisco. Are any other public comment? Okay, so you'll go ahead and recommend that to the board.
Yes, ma'am.
Which meeting is that going to be on next time?
The 12th.
The 12th. Okay,
Next week's meeting is only on the budget.
got it. Oh, that's right. Special meeting. All right, so let's move on to item number 3C, discussion direction regarding the fiscal year 2024-25 draft operating budget. And what we're going to do, Francisco and anybody else who may want to ask questions, is we're going to listen to the full presentation. About how long? 20 minutes?
30.
No.
30,
30 minutes.
yes.
And if you can shorten it a little bit, feel free to do so.
Yeah,
And then we're going line by line on every item.
Yeah. we will do that. Now,
Awesome.
the reason I say
My
30
game
minutes
plan.
is there's a lot to go over here.
Okay, we'll get
And-
started.
PowerPoint, please, Michael.
And then if anybody is making notes like myself, I'm going to put my finger up and say pause so I can make my notes and then let them continue.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, here we go.
Okay. See if I can get this. Here we go. Welcome to the 2024-25 preliminary operating and CIP budget. Is there an on button on this? Okay. Can you go
Let-
to the next slide, please?
Well, here, Damon
There
will
we go.
come check it
Okay.
out for you.
Yeah, Damon will help. Can you get that set up, please? Okay. We call this a step forward because we are moving forward in a new framework on how we present the budget. We are looking at incorporating a new rate plan for water and wastewater. That rate plan focused on eliminating operating deficits. If you remember Habib's discussion when he went through the rate plan, that the water fund was in a structural deficit and the sewer fund was in a similar operating deficit. So when we look at this budget, we have to take into account making sure those funds are healthy. And I'll get into that in a little bit more detail. We have a new rate structure for water and wastewater. We used to have the R&R component, a separate component. And now it's included in the operating revenues. And I'll get to that into more detail as well. We have a new fund that's coming up, the hydroelectric fund. And that's for our, so we can move, what we've done is move hydro revenues and expenditures into this new fund so we can do a better tracking of our costs for our relicensing efforts. And so in addition, we used to have just two funds, water and wastewater. Now we've pulled out those appropriate revenues and expenditures, moved it into the hydro fund. This is part of the structural changes, Director Underhill, that I've been alluding to. And this is the most interesting one. And for an accountant, we love this. We're revising fund structures and some of our accounts, our GLs, to better align our budget to our core functions and increase fiscal transparency. So what does this new rate plan mean? Well, there was a rate increase as of October 16th of last year. That was in place, but just as a footnote, that rate increase did not affect the entire year as far as revenues are concerned, because we didn't backdate it to July 16th. Our rates of our new fiscal year start July 16th because we bill from the 16th through the 15th, 2 months later. It's a bi-monthly item. So in this budget, we've included the amended water rate increase of 12%, for fiscal year 24-25, which will become effective July 16th of this year. And when I mean amended, if you remember, there were several iterations of the rates that were proposed, and it was changed that night of the meeting, which brought down the increases on some of these. So that's why I use the term amended. And the rates study, they didn't go back and change the rate study. They added an appendix at the end that showed the different iterations in the final rates. So because it was different than what they proposed, but this is what we have right now. And it has a 12% increase for water for 24-25 and one for sewer for 24-25. And this budget compares the water, sewer, and combined operating funds with the 24 increases to a budgets without increases. And that's a slide we'll get to in just a moment. Because your committee had asked for, what if we don't have a rate increase? What happens? And we'll get to that in just a moment. This is kind of a precursor of laying out the foundation of this whole budget process. So bear with me. My daughter says I should have been a college instructor or lecturer. Okay. This slide shows you what the rate increases are over the 5-year period of the rate study. And this is for water. So you can see on the top area of there, that's our existing rates that they work with. 12,159,000 across the board. The rate increases are the section below. So the first year, 2024, the model anticipated 2,229,000 of additional revenues. That's not the full year, because if you go over to 25, if we had those rates for the full year, it would have been $2,674,000. About approximately $445,000 more revenue will be coming in next year for the rate increase from last year than we had last year. And that's all related to the fact that the rates didn't go into effect until October 16th. Any questions on that?
Well,
This is important to lay the groundwork of how you can, because I'm going to build to why we have an increase in our rates, revenues.
and he explained to us why we didn't incur those increases immediately.
Because of the waiting period, and we didn't adopt the rates until September.
Right.
So that's why we didn't get the full year of rates. If we would have had the full year of rates in 23-24, it would have been 2,674,000.
Mm-hmm.
The additional revenues that the 12% increase for 24-25 is projected to be $1,779,000. And this is just the water fund. And this is straight out of the rate study. So when we look at the increase in water revenues as we move forward, this is going to play into it, plus another factor when we look at the R&R revenues.
I have a question right here, because you're talking about, let's go back up to base fixed charge.
Yes.
$7,077,000. That's not, doesn't show any growth.
No, it does not. If you remember what Habib said, that it's difficult to project growth. We've had 12 new connections this year in water. Really not a whole lot. So, and we had maybe 6 in sewer. So when we're looking at that, that's what we consider kind of budget dust.
Yeah, I think we'll stay with the
Yeah. It's more conservative. And as we move forward and see things move around, we always have the ability to come back and look. But after this first year, we're still kind of getting a feel for what the revenues actually are.
Okay, let me
Now,
take a note.
if we're approached about putting in a new subdivision, for example, where we will be seeing a lot of growth, say, for example, down in Jenny Lind.
Yes.
Yeah. How are we going to handle that?
Well,
So we're going to wait
yeah,
and do our questions at the end. So take your notes.
yeah, yeah. And
Sorry.
no, that's a good question.
That is
and we'll
one of my
address it.
questions. but let's move on with the.
Okay. I just wanted to show you the premise of how the rate structures are
Yeah.
working.
Okay, okay.
And I also have that for wastewater. Whereas so for fiscal 24, we anticipated 686,000 in new wastewater revenues. Remember, we only have a little over 5,000 customers.
So you
in-
projected another 186 customers over
Now
5
you're
years.
gonna wait.
I just got to be a little clarity on this.
There are no
You said
projections.
no. Okay.
No. And like I said, we had 4 or 6 new customers this year. The economy is not too kind when it comes to building. If we had that rate
Said
revenue
no.
for an entire year, it would have been 823,000. It's a difference of maybe 150,000. Next year, or this coming year with the 12% increase, it's 900, there should be an anticipated $922,000 worth of revenue coming in. When we use this budget, when we prepared the budget, we used the projections from the rate study for the rate revenues. So all we did is maybe add 4 new connections, but we used the projections. Now, one of the things to look at on this, and it's similar to water, if you go up to the total rate revenues above, you could see that 5.6 million was for the base or regular rate revenues, and 1.2 plus million was the R&R revenues. The rate study changed how we record R&R revenues. It's all blended into one rate now. So moving forward, we got to remember that's one of the other changes we're going to be talking about.
Pause for a second, Jeff.
Certainly.
Okay.
Okay.
Thank you.
As I mentioned, this rate structure changed how we record and record R&R revenues. In 2013, I remember it very well because you attended all the meetings on this rate structure. The additional monies that the 2013 rate hearing provided was for CIP. And it all went into the board adopted an ordinance that said X amount, all these revenues will go into a CIP fund and can only be used for capital projects. When we set up the revenues, we had operating revenues and R&R revenues. The operating revenues went into the water fund or the water operating or sewer operating fund. The R&R revenues went into the water or sewer capital R&R funds. They did not go into the operating fund. So it went right when the bills were identified, when the bills were processed, the R&R portion went straight into the R&R funds. That has changed. With this rate study, that they combined all those revenues into one revenue now. It's just rate revenue. So what we had to do is look at a way to continue to fund our capital program. And back in October, your board adopted one ordinance and one resolution setting the minimum base level of funding coming out of the operating revenues to fund R&R. That was $3.4 million on the water side and $1.3 million on the sewer. Very similar to what we have been receiving historically from the R&R revenues. So what we had to do then is it's going to show up in the revenues. We get this extra 4.7 million, but we have to transfer it out to the R&R fund. So it's kind of an in and an out. They negate one another. They offset one another. I can tell you're not liking me. I knew this was going to happen.
You're making notes?
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, so pause for a minute.
Okay. Yes. Okay.
All right, I'm good. Thank you.
Okay. Now I won't go through all the different words here, but I just condensed all that.
I'm following you.
The hydroelectric fund. This is where we have created, or we will, as of July 1, create a brand new fund. And this fund will have all the revenues and expenditures relating to our North Fork project and the New Hogan project. In those two projects, we have revenues coming in, which include the power generation revenues we get from NCPA for the North Fork and the money we get from MID for New Hogan.
Oh,
The expenditures are FERC fees and our DSOD dam fees and water permit fees that are associated with those two projects. We pay those through water resources budget. Yet, and there's a number of them, those that are related to the North Fork project, NCPA reimburses us 100%. We have to pay the fees because we hold the license. That is also included in the revenues that we're going to be looking, that are coming into the new hydro fund. There's same things with New Hogan. They're not as much, but MID reimburses us 80%. So those are the 80%,
80.
yes. So those are the revenues that are coming into the project, the hydro fund, the revenues and the reimbursements. And I'll get into the detail once we get into those funds. On the expenditure side, it is the fees we pay, which I just mentioned, but also those costs associated with this North Fork project. Michael's been talking to you quite a bit about this. We have hiring consultants, we have legal fees, we have some professional services, and we have time, salaries and benefit time that are getting charged to this project. So those items have been moved out of the operating budget, the water and sewer operating budget, into this new hydro fund. Basically, those funds and revenues have been split 73 water, 27 sewer. So if you figure on this, if you have $100,000 worth of costs that we're looking at, 73,000 of those is going to be shifted out of water into hydro. 27 is going to be shifted out of sewer into hydro. So as we increase the hydro budget, we're decreasing the water and sewer budget. Same thing with revenues. But what you're going to be looking at today is budgets for each fund and a combined budget. So the combined budget is basically the same. It's just changing how we look at water and sewer. And this all goes along with what we've been working with over the last several years with our auditors to do a better job of separating out our enterprise funds. Remember, we got rid of Fund 101. We got rid of this and that and how it's been changing. This is the final iteration of that process. And we're working very closely with the auditors. We're working very closely with bond counsel, Cameron Wiest. You know Cameron. He's done a number of our financing deals, and there's got to be a significant amount of work going into this process. And I'll get into that later. Next page. This is where I was talking about working with structural deficits and fund balances. Just one second. I won't go over the big structural deficits that Habib showed, but he showed each fund. The key for me is this: fund balance. How much money do you have in the bank? When we started out the beginning of this fiscal year, the water fund had a little over $3 million, $3,091,000 in the water fund. As of April 30th, it's down to 2.8 million. However, that number may be a little misleading because of March 31, it was 1,864,000. They received we have property tax coming in April. We're still operating at a deficit in the water fund.
And this is the operations. water
Operating,
fund. Okay.
yeah, operating. And the rate study was looking at closing that gap. Generally trying to use the first couple years of the rates to be able to stabilize both the water and sewer fund. The sewer fund, this is where we've had problems over the years. As of July 1 of last year, it was 1.7 million in the hole. In April, we're down to 900,000 in the hole. But that's using that property tax money that came in. It was even worse in March. It was 1,459,000 in the hole. This budget is developed around a plan to not only stabilize the structural deficits, but to restore the reserves and create positive fund balances. The reserve policy right now is a minimum of $500,000 reserve. We're 900,000 in the hole on sewer. So we've got to get to positive and get up to a manageable reserve level. So that's part of this process. We're not doing it in 1 year. Trust me, we're laying it out over several years. So this is part of the thinking behind how we pulled together this budget. A lot of different moving parts. And that's before we even get into the numbers.
Mhm.
Now, why does fund balance matter? Well, let's take a look at this. This is a new slide or portion of the budget we're including, and it talks to the fund balance on the water fund. You can see on the left-hand column, we have a projected fund balance of each of the different funds. These are only the funds that are going to be used as part of the operating budget. We didn't include all our funds, all our expansion funds, just those that are going to be part of it. We have the operating fund. We have the interest reserve fund, which has been known as Fund 108. We've talked about that on a number of occasions. We have the capital R&R fund that's going to be used for funding capital and also some of our debt service. We have the CIP loan that we took out, and we're projecting about 18 million. That can change. We've been working with engineering to try to get an estimate as to what it's going to be at year end. This is our best projection. Then we have Copper Cove expansion fund of just under 4 million. We're going to use a portion of that to help fund our CIP program. And we'll show you that when we get into CIP. The next column is budgeted revenues, and then budgeted expenses, transfers in. That's money being transferred from one fund to the other. So we have 2.4 million coming into the water operating fund. Most of that's coming from R&R for our debt service, because we have all the debt service in our water operating fund and our sewer operating fund. We also have transfers out. Those are dollars that apply to the money going into the R&R funds or in that area, in there, but it's also money going out of capital R&R into CIP projects. The next column over is use of funds. So you can see where we're going to be using our funds. 15 million on that use of funds. That equals our CIP budget for water for next year. And then the projected fund balance. So you can see our fund balance is going to go down about $12 million. And that's because we're using a significant portion of that to fund our capital program. So this is sort of a combined CIP, capital, and operating.
Okay.
The next one is the sewer fund. Very similar, but I wanted to show you one of the points at the top left-hand corner, projected fund balance. We're at negative 900,000 in the sewer fund. If you scroll all the way over to the right, we're projected to be down to about 420,000 in the hole. We're making progress. And it's my goal that hopefully by the end of next fiscal year, we'll be pretty close to it, if not a break-even point. But there's another kicker in all this. because the sewer fund has been negative all these years, staff brought to your board approval of a loan from the water fund to the sewer fund.
Right.
It's about 750, 800,000. We're going to have to pay that back down to make sewer fund whole. Not only structural deficit, fund balance, but pay back the loan.
Got it?
In this budget, you're going to see, and you're going to look at the surplus that it, the positive, the revenues over expenses, a positive number. That's because we have to pay down this negative balance. So it's, again, a lot of moving parts. But this is the easiest one to look at, and this is a hydro fund. We have budgeted revenues of 1,749,000, budgeted expenses 1,247,000, and we project a balance of $500,000 at year end. Now, we have not budgeted any use of that fund balance. Why? Because
Yeah, it's
we
good.
need to bring to your board all the new policies, reserve policies. We got to develop a policy for the use of the hydro fund, get directions of what we can spend it on and what we can't. And before we do it, spend it other than that, any of these balance, positive balances, we have to have a policy. And this is because we're trying to set ourselves up to have a very solid hydro fund in case we need to acquire financing in the future to be able to work through this relicensing project. And to be able to do that, we have to start a track record. And this is what we're going to be doing. Cameron's going to be helping us with this process of drafting all the policies because he's been involved in this type of work before. And we'll be coming back to your finance committee and the board in July and August for review and approval of these policies.
And just so I'm clear, the revenue for this fund only comes from those two hydro plants.
Two
No
hydro-
rates, nothing like that.
No rates,
Okay.
no nothing. Correct.
Okay, thank you.
But it's kind of interesting. Yeah, I'm off topic here, but I'm the speaker and I can do that.
Uh-huh.
See that $507,000? That's what hydro was contributing to our operating funds over this last several, this amount of money. So pulling it out is going to be a little bit of a challenge. This is where Cameron's coming in. We have to go back and negotiate with our lenders for all the water and sewer loans we have to date to let them know of this new structure, because some of the revenues and expenses that were included in their calculations are no longer included in the water and sewer funds. So we're going to be using Cameron to reach out. He's fortunately for us, he did 3 of the financing deals, so he's aware of it. And the other 2 were those loans. He sees no problem because he's worked with these banks before and he's worked with USDA. We just have to go through the process of possibly amending the agreements, and that will take time, but it is not a slam dunk. It's a process that we have to go through, and that's going to be included in this work. Just one more recap here when I talked about the different fund structures. As I mentioned, we continue to separate out water and wastewater. One of the steps we're going through, and Michael's been a big help with this, is we have the building admin fund where a portion of our connection fees go into that to help pay for new facilities, admin facilities, and across the ravine here for the shop, but also our interest reserve fund. It has both water and sewer reserves in it. We need to separate those out as well, and that's what we're going to be doing. So that's one of the processes. We right now, our water fund is the 300 series. That's where we have water operating and all our CIP projects. 500 is sewer, but in the 100 series, which is where we had that, the 101 account
101,
fund, we also have 104, the admin, 108, the interest reserve fund, the 120 series, 120, 130 for where we have our CIP expenditures. We have all our capital expenditures in one or the other funds. Makes it easier at year end, especially when we're looking at fixed assets. But we also have the water R and sewer R&Rs, 125, 135, and the loan proceeds, 123, 133. Those different funds are now going to start with threes. So
Good.
all our water is going to be in the 300 series. All our sewer is going to be in the 500 series. And Brian Nash, our auditor, loves it.
Mhm.
We've had initial discussions. We're working with him. He's going to be reviewing it all before we actually put it into fruition. The hydro fund is going to be in the 400 series. So we're going to have 300, 400, and 500. That's our new fund structure. And we have to set up chart of accounts for each of those funds so that we can properly record our revenues and our expenditures. So that is the end of my intro.
That was it?
That was the
We
intro.
did, oh, the intro, sorry.
So
Keep going.
that's what I needed to go through and explain how things are before we get into the numbers, because
Shall we
otherwise,
ask questions before we go to numbers?
why don't you ask questions on what I spoke about now? Yes, that's a good
I'm
idea.
kind of curious, this is kind of just a duh, but, you have water funds 300, wastewater 500, and then hydro 400. Why didn't you put like, 300 for hydro because it's weird, and then 200 or, 304, whatever. Why did you choose those numbers that way?
300 and 500 is a continuation of what we've used in the past.
Oh,
And when we're looking at historical data, it's a little bit easier to continue with that
Okay.
process.
And then,
400 was the thing available.
when you're
Because we
saying
used-
you're
Go ahead.
doing these new chart of accounts, that's, also part of the transferring to Tyler process,
Yes, it is.
correct?
Yeah.
To make sure your GL's all really cool and
Yeah.
then you move it in.
And
Okay.
we've been working at, Kelly's taking the lead, but what we're going to be doing here shortly is doing a data dump to them. And then they'll set everything up. And once we have the beta area, we can go in and clean up all the different GLs that we no longer need and go in and put the chart of accounts the way we want to.
I-
Because there's a lot of cleanup that's going to be involved in it.
I'm going to either ask questions or make comments. I'm going to start from your most recent talked about working towards the front.
Okay,
So, on that same page for the 400, 300, 500 series, you say better aligns our accounting with core functions, increases fiscal transparency. Well, I think it does make it transparent with your fund balances, but I'm looking forward to see more transparency in what the expenses are attached to that some way, somehow,
right.
and perhaps rate study
Yeah.
type items.
And
Okay.
one of the things that it'll allow us to do is we didn't include it here because we're just looking at those expansion funds and everything that's going to be used in this budget for the operating. But we're also looking at including all the expansion funds within some budget documents as we move forward. So you can see all the funds that are available within the water enterprise.
Mhm.
And that's where it makes it a lot easier for transfer.
Well, like I said, that's great for showing the balances. But I think we really want to focus on expenses too, which we
Yeah.
haven't even touched on that yet. So I'm sure it's there
Yeah,
somewhere.
and that's where it's going to be easier for the accountants because we don't have to split these
Yes.
104, 108. So there's going to be less auditing adjustments towards the end, and that's going to help in
Yeah.
lining things up. Also in the audit, because the audit's going to be be easier.
Well, the audit is very cumbersome regardless. So I'm looking at what's going to make it easier for me to see where the money's going,
And that's
kind of a
what,
thing.
yeah, that's a work in progress.
Yeah.
We're looking at utilizing the transition to Tyler to be able to enhance our reporting.
Just set that GL up right from the get-go.
Yeah.
That's most important. Okay, so I'm going to the hydro fund balance.
Yes,
And where you're talking about policies and to determine, because this one has a positive balance. For right now, it's just staying there, correct? Until this new policy to determine what we do with that balance.
That
Going
is
to
correct.
stay there. Nobody's going to be putting it in any other fund until we as a board
No.
come up with a policy.
You are correct.
Okay, when do you anticipate to have that policy before the board?
Probably we'll bring it to the finance committee in July,
Okay,
and then you'll get a couple
so
shots at
August,
it.
let's
And
say.
then brought to the board, and there'll be a couple readings of that, so we can get this going, probably the end of August.
Okay,
And just to be clear here, when we create these policies and your board adopts them, it's with the long-term view of what we want this hydro project to look like.
sure. Well, in fact,
But-
you'll bring some kind of a draft, a rough draft to us, this committee,
Yes,
and we'll tweak at our comments and then go to the board. They'll do their comments. or
that is correct.
Perfect. Okay, and then, doo-doo-doo-doo. The power sales, that was self-explanatory. Mhm. So I'm on,
Excuse me, just 1 minute.
oh yeah, go ahead.
Somebody, can you turn the aircon? Click it on. I feel a lot of heat up here.
Why?
Hey, I haven't been here for quite some time.
That's true. Well, you're doing a great job and we're
Thank
glad you're here. All
It's
right.
so much easier in person.
So, back to the slide, a step forward, a new rate structure. Anyhow, we're talking about the funding levels. So all the rates are going into the pot and then we're pulling out X amount to CIP, X amount to R&R.
Actually, the amount that goes into the R&R gets funded into the CIP.
Okay. So how did we determine? So it's like right now, the base funding level for water capital improvement program, 3.4 million and 1.3. Did the board just decide that? Now, how did we decide that was the right number to be pulling out of rates? Is it a percentage or?
That was back in October
Mhm.
that we came before your board. That is actually based on historical numbers.
And that's pretty much what we tend to spend each year?
Yeah, no, not what we spend, it's what we pull in. We spend more.
Okay.
Right.
Yeah, because we did not change the
So,
R&R
so that was
revenue-
based on, before it was a separate R&R. So
Yeah.
that's where you came up with that dollar amount, the historical of what we collected from that.
that is correct, because
Okay.
ever since the 2000 rate increase, once that rate increase was over with, we never changed the R&R funding levels.
Okay. And now wouldn't it make sense that we may want to, if we see all these costs increasing, why would we make that amount historically the same as it has been in the past? Or was that always increasing based on some
it-
number? I don't know.
It increases a little bit, but the only increase that you will see in R&R rates if we get new customers, because you'll add into the base rate and maybe a little bit more consumptive.
Okay.
But it does not increase a lot. Now, one of the things to remember here, and this is part of Bertha's love of my accounting techniques. The loans that we have that we have for the USDA Reach 3A, the AMI, AMR project, and the water CIP loan, those debt service on those loans comes out of the R&R funds. So we set aside those monies to pay for not only the capital projects and debt service. So we have to make sure that we have enough funds in that R&R fund to be able to cover that debt service.
Right. So let me go back to the amounts. That's the base funding level, the minimum, and
Yeah.
that's how much you're pulling from the rate revenue to set aside for R&R stuff.
Yes.
So what is our mechanism to ensure we're pulling enough of the rates to this R&R fund and not just keeping everything in operations? How are we going to monitor that to know we're not going to keep getting further and further behind? I mean, does
Right.
this number have to change? And if so, how do we know it? And what's our mechanism to do
By
that?
ordinance and by policy, your board set the minimum funding levels.
Okay,
And it also allowed for CPI increase on an annual basis
And
based
what
on
is that?
construction. Pardon me?
What is the CPI right now on that?
Engineering?
Okay, so,
I'm sorry, I don't have an engineer here,
Okay.
but it's about 3.5%.
but what I'd like to see is how is staff monitoring this particular fund to make sure we get enough money in there regularly to not having to keep raise rates all the time?
Good question. What I have done in conjunction with engineering is when they prepared their 5 and 10-year CIP. Remember when they
Yeah.
brought it to your board? Below all the summary pages you have, I have down below a funding reconciliation for each and every fund that's providing funds to the CIP, including R&R. So I projected R&R revenues and expenses out for 10 years. And that's where I find I've got to keep R&R whole. You got to pay debt service. You cannot renege, you can't default on that. And so I've included that. Plus, we're going to probably be going back to your board in a year or so to issue more debt for the next round. I've got that factored in there, and so does the rate study. And so I'm the gatekeeper.
So, right now, okay, let's go back to the rate study for a second. We need to make operations funding whole.
Yes,
We had to do the debt ratio to 25%, and then we had to build reserves. When this rate study was prepared and you combined it all to one revenue, and then you're pulling out for particular items, what percentage was determined in the model that we needed to take out of that rate to go to the R&R fund? What was that?
yeah,
And I'll finish a little bit more.
Sure.
So we know that, so we increased the rates 22%, and then year 25 is going to 12. Is that right? 12% increase? Is that what it was?
it's,
So anyhow, of those increases, if
Sure.
the whole rate went up 12%, of that 12%, how much should be going to CIP and the other? It shouldn't all just go to operations, I guess is where I'm
No.
going for it.
in the
Yeah,
rate,
you-
yeah, I get it. And in the rate
Sorry, you
model,
can't have it.
in the rate model, and I apologize for not having that number, the rate model shows how much funding is going to capital coming out. So
Okay.
I will have that to you for next week.
Okay, so I would like to see, here's the pie of all the rate revenue. So how much of the new rates that we're paying is going to this pot
Sure.
and how much is going to that pot? And then every time the rate increases, which it's set to do so, those numbers, the percentage of the pot,
They're going to shift.
yeah.
Because towards the end of the rate study, the last 2 years, it shifts more from operating into capital.
Mhm.
Because we got to take care of our structural deficits first. And as far as making sure we have enough money for our CIP program, as you're looking at the 5 and 10-year program, there's not enough money. So what we have is, especially in years 6 through 10 on some of these projects, and some of them, I mean, there's a lot of work in Sheep Ranch in that area, which we can only do if we get grant funds.
So one of the things that I'm trying to, I guess, avoid, the rate increase was huge. And we have good reason, sort of, as to why we have to do it for these 3 items. I would hate to see that, okay, well, after 4 years, we got operations all dialed in, but we didn't make any headway on CIP. I think those 3 pots should move up equally in being fixed, if that makes sense. I mean, that's just my
Yeah.
opinion.
Yeah.
And I just am saying this to you because that's what I would hope we would do, something along those lines, just because, the CIP is the biggest, isn't it, $90 million that we need projects done?
Yeah.
So we
Some-
should really be actively trying to do that with the amount of these increases we're doing.
Well, it's trying to do multiple things at one time. The rate study was more focused the first couple of years on the structural deficits. We cannot continue operating deficits because we're going to have to go out and issue more debt. And we have to fix that problem before we can go out and issue more debt. So it's a sequential process. But I'm ever mindful of how we're going to fund these CIP projects. Now, we're also going out for grants and to be able to do those things.
Yeah.
Michael talked about that and the Corps of Engineers providing us money. We will constantly talk about this process.
And
And I like your idea of looking at this year's budget out of the revenue pie chart.
absolutely.
I will
mean,
have
how
that
can we
next
not
Wednesday.
do that? And I'm gonna look at Damon over here and Pat a little bit. So
Yeah.
what I'm also trying to look for.
You guys mind
in
if I
these-
jump in on that one real quick?
Oh, I suppose. Is that Michael?
Yeah, and I'm sorry, I've been reluctant to jump in at all because Jeff's doing a phenomenal job.
Yes,
and
he
you guys
is.
are having a very good discussion. But if I could jump in on that point really quick.
Okay, you got 2 minutes. Go for it.
We have to remember, we went, okay, it will be quick. We went back, multiple times to the cutting board, I guess we could call it, on the CIP to decrease the rate increase from what it was initially proposed to be. And the only way for us to do that was to cut rate funded CIP projects out of the CIP. So we're
I
not
remember
going to
that.
see as much rate revenue going to infrastructure as we would have hoped for, or as we had initially proposed, because we cut a lot of those projects out. It didn't help the rate increase at all to cut grant funded projects or other projects that are coming from expansion funds or other sources of funds. The ones we had to focus on were the ones that were funded by rate revenue. So we're not going to see as much rate revenue going to those capital projects as we had initially proposed. But I completely agree that we still want to do as much as we can, and wherever, because we have not fully funded that 5-year spending plan. And so wherever we can, and this has been my message with the department heads, we need to continue to cut costs wherever we can to free up revenue for CIP projects, because we didn't fully fund them. So they're
Okay, so
that.
yeah, so I understand that makes sense. You pulled money out of CIP, so that made sense to not put as much there, and you kept some in operations and other. So I understand that. The other thing, and I know you folks, do your best to keep the operation budget down. And that's why when we look at that green sheet, we're going to be able to see some of those things. But I would hope after this next fiscal year coming up, I would hope that we don't have all these, okay, we've got to buy the tire balancer, which I think is a good thing. You know what I'm saying? It's like at some point, we just can't keep upgrading everything we need in operations as far as tools and supplies. I mean, we obviously need those things, but at some point, could we say, okay, we're not going to buy a couple new boom trucks or something to help bring the operations budget down or hold it stable and start increasing more in the CIP. That's what I'm trying to look for, what we could do. And I know it's hard,
It is.
but
and-
but when I see things like, we spend all this money on Tyler, yes, we needed it, and our phone trees and all this stuff to be efficient. But at what point is that efficiency going to pay its off? Like when we're going to save bill on our solar, we're not going to pay PG&E, but we're going to be paying for the equipment, and it'll take 8 years till we pay it off. That's what I'm trying to look for in how we do these purchases, right? That are more efficient. And I get it, makes sense, especially, some of the things that operations staff needs to get the work done makes sense. We don't have to outsource it. But at some point we should be going a little more like this, other than normal PG&E increases and regular supply increase. That's what I'm hoping we could do at some point in this 5-year
We're all,
race.
yeah, and we're all sensitive to that. I think
Perfect.
you guys, the board has done an excellent job since I've been back here at CCWD to really kind of aggressively update a lot of the
Yes.
infrastructure, a lot of the equipment. And so,
Mhm.
yeah, absolutely.
Some point, let's,
Right, but it is, we will still be compelled operationally to make sure that whatever we're doing is that we always have the folks that have public health and safety at top of.
absolutely.
So
Yeah.
really, that's really should be what drives those requests.
I
And-
agree.
And refers back to the strategic plan for
Yeah.
operations.
Yeah, yeah.
Right, yep, absolutely.
Yeah.
Okay, and so, I made my comment on the R&R. Okay, so in the very beginning, the numbers here, you stayed with, base fixed rate charge, we're keeping it at 7,077,000 the next 5 years.
Yeah.
So what if in year 26, we get, 200 new customers, let's say? I know it's really off the wall and it's not going to happen, but what if? How does this affect, if we got those, would all the extra money go to CIP? I mean, I don't know.
That's-
What's the policy?
Right there, and this is where starting, not this year, obviously, because we're just into the
Right.
rate study. But at the end of next fiscal year is an appropriate time, once we do the audit and everything, to go back and see where we compare with the rate model itself. Because we'll have a year and a half of actual revenues and expenditures. And I do have some slides here that compares the operating budget to the rate model. So we'll kind of get into
And-
that.
And
But-
that was going to be my one other question. When
Yeah.
are you going to use that rate model? So sometime
we are.
next fiscal year, and we'll have a little study on that to see
Yeah.
how we're doing.
And it's really, and when I look at numbers, it's sort of like the discussion we've had. When you're in the first couple months of a fiscal year, the numbers really are kind of meaningless when you're looking at where we're going to be year end. When we're looking at this rate study, remember, we haven't even had, let's see, rates started October 16th. We won't have a full year
Year.
rate revenue for a while. So after 24, 25 is over with, and we know where we stand, that's when I recommend going in and taking a look at it. But we always look at when we do budget projections and we look at this, we will look at budget projections and say, hey, you know what? We just had 200 new connections. What's that going to do to our rate revenues? We'll look at that and we'll say, okay, it's going to give us an extra 200,000 or 250,000 a year. I'm just throwing out a
Yeah,
number.
yeah.
What are we going to do with that rate revenue? Is it going to go to CIP because we tend to be a little underfunded?
Yeah.
Or is it going to go to something else? And one of the things we want to do is when we look at the reserve policies for hydro, we're going to come back and talk about your board and your finance committee about all our reserve policies,
I was going to
how we
say,
use that. And that's going to help drive these discussions.
because, in theory, those new rates are increasing the operating budget, which, okay, maybe it'll just be enough to do the increase of supplies or whatever. But I would, every time we get a certain amount in this reserve policy, not even a reserve policy, in the policy with this rate structure and,
Mhm.
and whatnot we're doing in this budget.
Yes.
When we get X amount, let's say we get, 20 new customers. I know it's not that much, but it could add up. That we should have a policy kind of before we get to that point, what we're going to do with that in relation to the next 5 years of the budget that's been, the rate that's been approved.
Yes.
Because,
Can
if
can I
we,
jump
we
in here,
cut,
Director Cicada?
wait, yeah, just 1 second. So if the CIP got cut, that, to my opinion, is where any extra should go. But
Yeah.
obviously it would be board and staff recommendation.
Mhm.
But go ahead, Michael.
Yeah, I just want to chime in a little bit here to make sure we're not thinking of those new customers as all new revenue, right? Because those new customers also come with increased costs on the
That's true.
operational side.
Yeah.
That's
And
true.
we're not, we're not, we can't just bank that or set it all aside for infrastructure. We will see increases in costs that new rate revenue will go towards, but also some portion of it, yes, will help
Yeah.
contribute to infrastructure the way that our current ratepayers do. But it's not like it's all new revenue that we can, that we have discretion.
Right, you
That's all
got to
gonna be
cover the cost to
restricted.
serve. I get that. But I would like to see that policy of what we're going to do when this happens prior to us getting to that point.
And
It's
that's gonna
just
be
like,
just-
because one, it'll keep us, okay, our operation budget will go up just to account for the cost to serve.
Mhm.
And that little extra, if any, where should it go? And
Sure.
what I'm trying to do is try and keep the operations budget. This is it, this is what you guys get. So decide if you need your tire balancer or the boom truck, and then next year switch it out, right?
Right.
And
Yeah,
obviously
I-
safety and all that comes first, but I'm just trying to get the operations more steady and not, and obviously things are gonna come up, but if we can get that,
Yeah.
okay.
And just a
think the-
footnote
the
to, go
policies
ahead.
we have do that, though. I think it fits within the current framework. I think we should be really cautious about creating a different class of customer based on the time of the connection. Like, a new customer has a different reserve policy.
I
than
wouldn't,
existing customer.
but I wouldn't look at it like that. I would say that base rate going across is gonna change. So when that happens, it won't just be that customers. So when that base rate goes up because of, we have more customers, then we have our policy that says when it goes up so much, remove the cost to serve. Is there anything less?
Yeah. And just as a footnote to that,
Well, there should,
Is that-
actually, excuse me, there should be, because all the rates are combined now
yeah, they are.
in that model.
And speaking of those combined rates, the rate model does say we're factor in new debt service because we're going to have to issue debt for our CIP
Mhm.
program. And that could upwards be $550,000, $600,000 or more a year, depending upon the level of financing, up to $1 million. That's factored into these rates, and that's some of the future rate increases that you're going to see. So it's a lot of moving pieces, but we all come to the same conclusion that we can't ignore CIP. Our capital funding is critical, and we can't ignore operations either. So every year we're going to have these discussions on how best to allocate our funds.
Well, I'd like to see that model that we own in place and brought here on a presentation showing here it is this way, here it is that way, utilizing it that way live kind of a thing
Yeah,
at some point.
exactly.
Anyhow, let's move on. Bertha, do you have any questions so far?
Well, no, you're asking legitimate questions. I want to go back to the beginning, where you said that, let's see, where was it? That, okay. The creation of a hydroelectric fund, which includes moving hydroelectric revenues and expenditures from the water and wastewater funds to the new hydroelectric fund. I know I classify it.
Sure.
How are you going to pinpoint what are hydroelectric funds?
Oh, what revenues and expenses?
Uh-huh.
Oh, that's part of our budget process. And as I mentioned on the revenue side, it's the MID and NCPA revenues that are coming in for our power generation.
Okay, so those you can pinpoint, or you can, establish what they are.
Yeah,
And then those are the ones that.
that
go-
get moved out of water and sewer into hydro.
Didn't they used to be like in the other revenue
It's in
underwater? So
other
we
Yeah,
moved it out of there to
Yeah,
its own
it's in other
spot.
operating revenues. You're correct. Now, the other component of revenues, as I mentioned, we have to pay the state and federal dam and water rights
Yeah,
fees.
your
related to
DOD or
those.
whatever it is.
Yeah.
Yeah.
This is an accounting function. We record the expenses and then we have to record the revenues over here. We can't just offset the expenses and show
Right.
zero. So the expenses are over here. The revenues from NCPA are reimbursed dollar for dollar. So those come in under other operating funds. The MID ones, they give us 80%, but it's a much lower. So those are strictly revenues associated with operating these projects.
Mhm.
And then we do the same thing on the expenditure side.
Okay.
Well, that's
It's
all
rather
part of
exhaustive.
400 accounting system
Mhm.
number
Yeah.
too.
Exactly.
Okay. Going, okay, when you have a step forward, we're talking about, grant funding. And why is that always, a deficit?
Which page are you on?
Okay, well, you don't have it numbered.
The bottom right-hand corner, a little hard to see.
Oh,
Hey, Jeff?
here it is. Oh,
Jeff?
okay, yes.
Jeff,
Nine.
put page numbers on these
9.
for the next
Page
presentation.
number 9, okay.
Oh, I kind of see him, bold them, make them bold so we can see.
Okay,
Yeah,
Gotcha. Go ahead, Bertha.
Your grant funds in water,
Yes, ma'am.
why are they always,
Negative?
uh-huh,
Well, it's actually, that's how they show use of funds. So we're gonna, those are monies that are going to to 120, our CIP project. It's just an accounting term. But it's, if you look at that 15 million, that equals the amount of the water CIP program.
okay, but I was looking specifically at the grant funds
Yeah,
and,
but if you look at the other ones, we have negatives around,
right,
Yeah.
no.
yeah.
uh-huh.
We're taking them out of. we
It's
don't-
because we spent the money
Yeah,
on the
and we get
project.
reimbursed in arrears.
Yeah.
Oh, okay, okay.
Yeah. That's why you got to have enough cash in the bank to pay off these,
Mhm.
because sometimes it's a 30 to 90-day wait.
Yeah.
Right. Okay, you went back to talking about Cameron and how Cameron's gonna have to go out and so we can establish more debt.
In the future, yes.
Yeah, yeah, because if we go on reputation, I think one of the things that I'm always very pleased about CCWD is that we've never defaulted. We've never
Never.
been late, never been anything but positive. So that's really working in our favor.
It is. And banks love us for that.
Mm-hmm.
And what we're looking at here is to continue that trend.
Right, right. Uh-huh, uh-huh. And so we can show them that we are solid.
Yes, ma'am.
Mhm.
And one of the things we want to do is when you issue debt, and if we have to issue debt out of the hydro fund, you want to have several years of audited financial statements that show a separate hydro fund. We don't have that now.
Mhm.
So it's kind of trying to pull that apart.
Mhm.
So at the end of fiscal year 25, the audit will come out and it'll show 3 separate funds. And from that point forward, we'll have a record of audited financial statements showing the hydro fund, showing the healthy water and sewer fund. So when we go out and issue debt again, it's all there.
Okay, so we're not saying that within the next year, we're going to be looking for more money.
Not in the hydro fund.
Uh-huh.
We may start, and it depends on timing of some of our projects, especially if we get grant money for the Arnold Secondary Clarifier Project. We may, if we get grant money, we can kind of defer some payments, some loans, but we will have to issue debt sometime in 26. And so that's why we want to make sure all our ducks are in a row to be able to do that.
Mhm. Mhm.
And that's what the model talks about.
Okay. So I'm okay with 26.
Okay.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, that's all I have.
Okay, let's, any public comment at this point? We may as well,
Sure.
right? Any public comment on what Jeff has said so far?
Yeah, can you hear me?
Yes, who are we talking to?
This is Mike Rogers in Valley
Oh,
Springs.
hi, Mike.
So Jeff, thank you. This is quite informative. The realignment of the various funds and the creation of the hydro fund makes a lot of sense to me. My question is there a scenario historically or in the future where we're having to, similar to how you had to loan the wastewater money, steer money away from the water budget or wastewater budget for a hydro? Is it, in other words, is it self-sustaining? Is it a self-sustaining operation that wouldn't cut into either operational or CIP from water or wastewater? You know, aside from some catastrophic event, act of God or something like
Yeah.
that.
Does Michael want to
That's a
take
very
that?
good, that's a very good question. And that is where the policy will come in. But the plan right now is to have it isolated where the revenues right now are only staying within the hydro project because there's going to be multiple costs coming up in future
Yeah.
years. So at this particular point, under the current scenario, no, we don't see any need for water or sewer to supplement the hydro fund.
Well, but even can we? Michael, is there
Been
any
here-
comment you want to make
Yeah.
on that?
Can you hear me?
Yes.
On that one, it's a good question, Mike. I think, really the point of hydro is that the funds go the other direction, right? We're not in the hydro business for, for fun or for expense. We're in it so that it helps pay
Offset.
water and wastewater funds. And the surplus that you see in there right now, eventually, as Jeff said, we're in a stable position in the hydro fund. We're on track to be able to issue debt at some point in a couple of years when we really need it. But that surplus actually goes back into water and wastewater, hopefully CIP, and hopefully that surplus will be growing over time as we're working on a bunch of different stuff on that front. So the purpose of the hydro fund is actually to contribute funds to water and wastewater over time, not
Yeah,
the
and
other way around.
that was kind of my assumption, but I didn't know if, there were events that could occur or something where all of a sudden we're having to subsidize hydro for some reason and steer funds away from badly needed CIP or something like that. So, but you've answered the question. Thank you, Michael and Jeff. Thank you. Very helpful.
All right. Thank you. Any other public comment? None? None?
No,
Okay. What was that?
Yeah, I noticed the budget process is a top-down kind of approach. Here are the revenues. What are we going to need to spend to stay under it? Is that correct or no?
It's an iterative process. We have a target of what we believe are our revenues as we go through this. And then we look at departmental submissions about what they want to have. And if the total expenditures are greater than revenues, we start cutting the expenditure side. And we've done that as part of this budget. We're limited by the revenues that we pull in. We cannot spend more money than what we bring in.
Okay, so if we were to ask for a zero-based budget, how different would it look? Because, like you say, you're building to stay under a ceiling versus what is the absolute you need to run the place?
So, because we don't.
Michael, you there?
Still with us?
Yeah.
We lost you. Did you want to say something?
How about now? Can you hear me?
Yes. Go ahead.
I was just saying, when we're working with the department heads and on the expenditure side, we're not, we're working on the expenditures to try to keep the budget as low as possible, but still do everything that we need to do. We're not trying to stay below a ceiling. We're not, preferably we bring it down as low as possible. So it's not that we set an amount of revenue and then we, build our expenses up to it. It's, we go through the expenditures and try to keep those expenditures as low as possible. And then that's when Jeff comes in and tells us whether we do or don't have enough to fund it. And even then we'll go back through it and try to reduce expenses where we can. But we're not just working up to, a revenue target at the front end of the budget process.
Cool.
And another point is when we develop our budget, we do look at historical trends, but we also look at any possible new projects that are going to be coming in, some equipment that needs to be purchased. But when we look back at historical, we also go into a deeper dive and saying, oh, that line item there, that 50,000 included a one-time item of 15,000. So we'll back out those one-time purchases.
Right.
In case of the, some things change. In the board of directors, they have 2 elections coming up. We didn't have them last year. So we manage each department. We go into each line item and look at each of the expenditures. So it's not a rubber stamp.
Got it. Thank you.
But you really,
Yep,
it
the-
looks
the-
like you do start with, staff gets together, determine what their needs are. You
Yeah.
have a total, then it goes to you and you say, not gonna work, kind
Well,
of a thing.
it's Michael and I both look
The
at
start,
these. We
yeah.
meet with our department heads. And even before we look at the revenue side, as Michael said, we go through and say, do you really
Yeah.
need this? Is this important, or is this a right number? And they go back and they redo their budget requests. So it's an iterative process. And then once we look at all that, then as we go through and do projection, because sometimes our budgeted numbers or revenues, we wait for the county to be able to provide our property tax projections. So there's different sources. Once we get the revenues in, as Michael said, if I come back and say, you know what, even your best guess is $500,000 off, cut some more.
Got it. Now, you mentioned that this new structure of moving the hydro funds and starting the 400 series and eliminating the 100 series, et cetera. I'm assuming that this new structure of budgets would produce a different cost of service study model, would it not?
The only change would be and if you look at it, I don't think it would require a new cost of service study, because the dollars, when you look at the overall budget to the net difference between revenues and expenditures in the hydro fund is minor compared to the rest. But as I mentioned to Director Cicada, is after this coming fiscal year, 24-25, we will go back in and take a look at the model,
Using the model.
using the model and where we are. And I've actually have a slide showing where we compare to the model too.
Okay,
Great,
So-
thank you.
You're welcome.
okay. All right. Any other public comment? Seeing none, move on, Jeff.
Okay. I'm sorry, it was a little over 30 minutes.
Yeah, but that wasn't your
But
fault, the last
yeah,
part.
That's okay. It was important to get the foundation done.
Right, I agree, getting these questions done right now helps us to be more stable thought process, as we move,
And
through the
hope-
numbers.
Hopefully the rest of it will go quicker.
Yeah.
Okay, so here is a summary of our budget by funds. It's broken out by water, wastewater, and hydroelectric. The sources of revenues are on the top, the uses of the monies are on the bottom. And it's very easy to see here how much was pulled out of the combined water and wastewater into the hydro fund. We actually have a combined operating budget of almost $35 million for all three funds.
Do we want to do the same thing? Get through these
Yeah,
next
let's get
few
through-
slides with numbers and then
Yeah.
questions again? Okay.
Yeah, operating revenues. This is where we're going to get into the R&R discussion. And it's a little easier to do once we get down into the individual funds.
Okay.
So as you can see here, the bottom line is we pretty much have a balanced budget on the water side, the sewer side, a little bit of excess revenues over expenditures, but that's going to help pay down the negative fund balance. And the hydro, we still have to figure out what to do with. All in all, we're looking at a good, solid, balanced budget. Very similar to what we had in 24-25. And I think it's a little easier to see once we get into each of the different funds. Here is the budget by pie graphs to show you how much is in the district inflows, which are revenues on the left-hand side, the operating revenues. That's our rate revenues. That's our new connection revenues. It's also revenues where we put the
I like that.
the online transaction fees into. So that's something we'll bring up a little bit later. Non-operating revenues, you got Director Cicada, you mentioned that's where property tax revenues go. those type of revenues that are not associated with operating the system. Grant revenues are in there as well. Then we have transfers in, and that's mainly for debt service. On the outflows, we have salaries and benefits, which makes about 38% of the or total operating budget. Service supplies is 31%, debt service about 10%, and transfers out going to capital 16%. So you can see we're transferring out 5.4 million of this combined operating revenue into the capital program.
Good. Okay. Which we're also calling the reserves.
Yes.
Okay.
Let's go into the water budget on the next slide. This is where you can see the difference between 23-24 to the draft budget for 24-25. The revenue, the operating revenue is up. That's a combination of the rate increase, but also that additional money going into the R&R program.
I have to say one thing. So on this page we're looking at, it says operating revenue.
Yeah.
Is that rates?
That's
revenue?
rates.
Should we change operating
Well,
to rates? Because
No, it includes other things. The operating revenue, hold on just a second.
we have operating revenue, you're saying non-operating revenue and transfers in.
Okay,
And
If
when I
you-
look at this, it's like, oh, it's just the operating budget,
yeah.
you know, the
Now,
operation department budget. So I'm
Your-
wondering.
budget, your agenda packet.
Mhm.
If you go to page 3 of the budget itself, it's the water fund budget detail.
Okay.
This is what's included in operating revenues. You have water
Wow.
sales, irrigation, inspection fees, account establishment fees, delinquent.
Yeah, so I could see why you wouldn't want to call it rates.
Yes,
Because it's not really all rates, because your irrigation water cells is extra, fire
Right.
hydrant inspections.
and if you go
Oh,
down to the
okay.
last item, other operating revenue,
Mm-hmm.
you can see the variance is, we're anticipating $158,000 more. That's our online transaction fees, reimbursements for that. So as our fees have gone up, because when we put together this current year's budget, we only had a couple months of actual experience with the online transactions. We have found the usage is up. And so when we have more on the fees that we get charged from Tyler and other third parties go up. Well, as that goes up, our transactional fee revenue goes up, but we're only capturing about 81% of the fees.
Is that the only thing in that fund, other operating fund?
We get a little bit of reimbursements from other agencies for our CPPA. Remember, we use CPPA rates.
I'll
for-
have you
for
keep
electricity.
going, but this is one of those things because there's an offset going on there.
Yeah.
I'd like to see that as own line item, but keep going.
Yeah, so that's
Excuse me, can you go back and you referred to page 3?
page
Of
3
inside our board packet right here,
of the
Bertha,
board packet.
looks like this. The board packet, not the presentation.
Yeah, no, that's where I went and I can't
Should be
find.
bottom right-hand corner.
Yeah, I know.
Okay,
We'll discuss that when we get
Sure.
to actually looking at the budget.
Yeah.
Sorry to interrupt.
okay. So in looking at this slide, we have a decrease in non-operating revenues. Remember, that's taking money out that goes to the hydro fund, and a decrease in transfers in. The reason for the decrease in transfers in, if you remember back in prior years, we had the underground construction crew, and that was funded by R&R funds. We no longer have, remember, all the money now is in one pot. Instead of transferring that portion of it to R&R and then back into operating, we're just leaving that revenue in the operating fund. So we don't have that transfer in, it's just more revenue available for us. On the down on the uses, capital outlay, you do see an increase, but 393,000 of that is the O'Dowd's Landing fuel break project. That's in capital outlay, that's grant funded. And then, so that's something you'll see there as well. So that's, even though the increase is there, it's being paid for by grant funds. And it's not a CIP project. We stuck it in capital outlay. We ready to go to sewer?
Yes, I am. You okay?
Mhm.
Okay.
Because we're going to try and get through this and then go back to our question.
Sure. And here's the pie chart again for the water fund and uses of funds and the split of revenues. It's just a visual that it's easier for me too to see this, to see how things are. Okay, on to sewer or wastewater. Here, we do have, again, additional operating revenues, but a portion of that is the R&R component. We have non-operating revenues going down, and that's due to the siphoning off of revenues for the hydro project and a little bit more money coming in and transfers in. And that's associated with some of the debt service we have. On the uses, salaries and benefits did go up some. Service and supplies went up, which is natural because we see the growth. The salaries and benefits is the we have COLAs, MOUs, step increases, but we also saw a significant increase in health insurance costs this year. Debt service, as I mentioned, increased. Now this is coming back to the loan from the water fund to the sewer fund. We have a debt service schedule that was approved by your board that carries it out to 2036, 37. We can't wait that long. So I'm applying about some additional money, $470,000 of some of those excess revenues over expenditures to help pay down the loan a little bit faster. And so in a couple of years, that loan will be gone. And some of that money goes into the water operating fund. So it's going to get a little bit more revenue. And then you can see there that the transfer out capital, 700,000. That's the additional money we have available to go into the capital program above the 1.3 million. Michael and I had a discussion regarding the use of this 700,000, whether or not we want to pay the full amount down on the water loan or go to the negative balance of the sewer fund. We decided to do it over several years to help provide additional funding on the sewer side for capital, because we do have a greater need in that CIP program than we do in the water. But it's a balancing act, trying to move funds into different areas. Here is a chart showing again the breakdown of operating revenues versus non-operating, and transfer in. And also when it comes to expenditures, salaries and benefits, about 35% of the operating budget, service and supplies, 28%. Transfers out to capital, about 20%. That, Director Cicada, is again our rates that we're using for the capital program because we know it's important. And then obviously debt service. And the hydro fund. What we have here are the revenues, which I have mentioned. On the expenditure side, we do have salaries and benefits that we're looking at, and we're going to be tracking our time, creating project number. So any of the work associated with the North Fork project, relicensing effort and all that, we will keep track of our time. This is an estimate, and this is our best estimate at this particular point in time, but we will be tracking dollars, not only salaries and benefits, any of our other expenditures for use of consultants and such will be tracked as well. And here's a pie chart showing the revenues and expenses for the hydro fund. Do we want to take a break at this point, or I just have a few more
Ask
slides?
questions on just or this isn't going to start diving into the budget itself or
Yeah,
no?
I've got a few more slides and then we can dive into it.
Okay, go
Okay.
ahead. Keep
And this is a summary. This shows the budgets by department. The next slide showing you the total, the preliminary budget versus the, actually, that should be the column on the second one from the left should be actually the 23-24 budget and the variance.
where it says department total.
Yeah, so, yeah, department total. No, department total is correct. The gray one where it says fiscal year 24-25
Oh,
draft,
gotcha.
that should actually be 23-24. I
Okay,
will make that
draft
correction.
And then previous.
Right. So you can see each budget has gone up in some areas. When I look at the department, but the board, the main driver of that is health insurance and the upcoming election. And we got, I think, $5,000 budgeted for the election. The next slide is a summary of salaries and benefits by department. Now, one of the things to note, remember my favorite department, non-departmental, where nobody resides?
Mhm.
When we look at our PERS costs, our PERS are broken out into two costs. One's the normal cost. PERS gives us a percentage. That's how much we pay based on our monthly payroll.
Mhm.
So if we have a $5 million payroll, they give us a percentage and that's what we have to pay. The UAL is unfunded accrued liability. That's kind of what I call OOPS, PERS OOPS. That's kind of an accumulation over time of changes to their assumptions, their actuarial assumptions, or if they didn't meet their investment targets. However, when you look at the PERS valuations, and we got three plans, we have the miscellaneous tier 2, and PEPRA. Miscellaneous is for people who were hired prior to 2013. So we have different plans. We have to figure out the UAL for each member, and they only give us a dollar amount. So we go through an iterative process, figuring how much it is based on total payroll in PEPRA, tier 2, and miscellaneous. However, in miscellaneous, that number comes up to also includes the UAL for retirees. We do not include the UAL for retirees in the individual department budgets. We only include that amount of the UAL associated with the current employees. So that 396,000 UAL cost in the non-departmental, that's our cost for retirees. That's where it kind of sticks out there.
Okay.
The next slide is our capital outlay budget. And you can see at the very bottom, that's the Dowd Landing Fuel Break project. And then the other projects there are anywhere from lease vehicles to asphalt rollers, water truck. Damon can address all those. Hydrant replaces, I believe Damon talked about that at the board meeting yesterday. And the critical generator replacement, that's a carryover from this current year. There was a delay in the funding for that, and it's coming into next fiscal year, and that's our 25% match. And Damon can expand upon that.
And the Dowd Fuel Break project is all 100%
Grant funding,
grant. Mhm.
yes.
Question, what is, retirement health savings?
HSA.
Oh, you're back on the
Yeah,
other slide.
on page
Okay, sure.
22.
A couple years ago, the district and your board approved a changing in the retiree health program. For new employee and for older employees, they get retiree health. Newer employees, they get, it's different. It's called defined benefit versus defined contribution. A defined contribution, you know how much it's going to be. They put so much in way. They put it in a health savings account. So when they get retired, they can use that to help offset their insurance costs. Whereas older employees, people who are retired before a certain date had retiree health, they could either stick with that or opt out of it and get into this retiree health savings account.
All right, we're gonna hold our questions, right, to get through. the
Yeah,
next-
because I wanted to do two more things, a few
Yep,
more
let's
slides.
get through these and then we
Yeah.
can go back to questions and then take a
Right.
break.
This, and I'm not going to go into detail here, but this is a schedule of our debt service. If you go down to line number 15, and I agree, Director Cicada, I love these lines.
Oh, yeah, we need lines on our claim summary
It-
too.
Consider it done.
Thank you.
When I first saw that, I go, what the heck? And then I looked at that, I go, it's a great
It
idea.
is great.
So if you go to line 15, you can see that the adopted budget for last year was 72,000 for the loan repayment. It's jumped up to 481 principal and interest, just because we want to get that loan paid off and get that off the books.
Got it.
Yeah,
And-
we like to see those.
Yeah.
Yes, me too. I got four more slides.
Okay.
Okay. The request was, what happens if we don't have the 24-25 increase for both water and sewer? And in the yellow mark down below, that's what would happen if we don't use the increases for this year. Now,
Based on all the expenses you're proposing.
yes, exactly.
All right.
And based on the rate model. Okay, now. The other question is, how does this,
One real quick.
Sure.
So on the hydro budget, that's a positive 507. Was that amount included in the rate model when we did the rate
yes, it was.
study?
Yes,
So if that money went back into water or sewer, that number could be different.
well, again, this doesn't get rate revenue. The hydro fund, no rate revenue.
I know that, but if you used
Yeah, it
this
could have gone,
income as in the rate model,
yes.
oh, I guess it would go the other direction though.
Yeah.
Okay, never mind.
Now, the question is, how does this compare to the rate model? Now,
Mhm.
it's a little extracting the data was a little bit of a challenge because it doesn't quite line up with the R&R component and everything else. But if you go to the page 26, you can see what the draft budget looks like and what the rate study showed of pulling this out.
Okay,
So we're having more operating revenues of 215,000, but 135,000 of that is new Tyler fee revenue, online fee revenue. So that's something that we didn't anticipate within the rate model, but we also had higher expenditures too.
yeah. And I'm gonna just interject a comment. I believe under all this revenue sources, rate revenue should be separate and the operating revenue should be, because I think people who pay that rate increase may want to see the rate revenue section. Because if it was separate, you wouldn't have to explain that. Unless, of course, on the rate study. Is
The
a
rate
rate study
pulls
broken
it all
down?
together. Yeah,
Oh,
but
well,
I
I'd
can- I
still
can
like
fig-
to see it separate if we
Yeah.
can. I think that might be a nice number to see.
I can work on that.
Okay.
I'll see what I can do.
All right, sorry to interrupt. Go ahead.
Okay. So in looking at that, again, a good portion of that increase from the rate model is the additional revenues coming in from online fee transactions. On the non-operating revenue, that's where we pull out the hydro.
Okay.
Now but it also, we do have pulling out hydro, but we also put in the grant revenue from the O'Dowd's Landing fuel break project. Under uses of funds, that's pretty self-explanatory. Yes, we have a little bit higher in capital outlay, but we started with a base last year, a lower base, and that's where the O'Dowd's fuel break comes in. 393,000 of that is in the water budget, is not in the wastewater budget. So we're pretty close to the rate model.
You have more to keep going, or is it question time?
Now, I got two more thoughts.
Okay, go ahead.
Same thing for sewer. For the wastewater here. Again, when you're looking at some of these revenues they're a little bit off, a little bit different, but we're still with, I think, when you're looking at an $11 million budget, we're pretty darn close as to what, and some of that is siphoning off again, the hydro money. And then down below is the comparison from the rate study to the expenditures. Now, one of the things that the rate study did not include was an additional $700,000 of transfer out to support the capital program, which you see on that bottom line of transfers out for capital.
And why wouldn't that rate model have that in there?
Because we ended up doing something a little bit different. We extended the pay down on the negative fund balance to be able to help fund some of the capital programs. So we're pushing that out a little bit. I could have taken that 700,000 and put it to pay down fund balance, but we thought it was important to have those funds available this year for capital programs. And in totality, this next page is all the budgets compared to the draft budget.
Did our rate increase for, 24, 25 and, well, 24, 25? The amount we increased the rates, did it match up the first 2 years with what the rate study recommended? I don't remember.
Actually, I use their numbers because I don't really have a way to determine revenues for next year based on such a small
Yeah.
data set.
Okay, so for the current year that we're in right now, well,
For 23,
what did we approve for the rate increase?
we
for the
approved
first 2
the
years?
rate increase that was in the project. We increased, no.
It was
We used the original
22,
rate
well.
increase, a little bit higher for the rate increase, but you scaled it back.
Right,
in
that's why I
September.
don't remember what it was, but you know what? As I'm saying
Um,
that, go
hold
ahead,
on.
keep going. I've got it here in my book.
Yeah, I've got it as well. Because remember, we took out,
Or no.
when we approved the budget, that was in June. But we did different ones. We pulled out CIP projects. So we reduced from dollar amounts, especially for future years. And then your board reduced that even more, especially in outlying years. But it was a 22% increase for year one, ended up being 12 for year two, 13, 3, 7, 7.
Okay, fine.
And that's where those dollar amounts that I showed you in an earlier slide is real helpful to understand how we used our revenue projections.
All right, keep going.
Okay.
Good. And then,
As soon as we're finished with questions on the PowerPoint, I want to move into the budget package that was included in your agenda.
okay, before you get there, we'll do questions, take a break, and then get into the budget. Is
That would be
okay?
great.
Okay, so are we ready for questions?
I am ready for questions.
I don't really have that many. I said the one about pulling out the rate revenue under sources. I think
Yes.
that would be helpful.
I got that here.
Let's see how that goes. That's 3 plans. Let's look at that. Draft health insurance. So if we can go back to page 17, schedule C1, well, on either C17 or 15, let's do 15.
Okay,
On the, you see the schedule B1 water, the revenue, and then the uses. So the transfers out, that includes reserves and what we spent. So the variance is how much is what's going to the reserves not being spent. Is that the way I read that?
that.
I'm on line 11, page
3.4 million, is that what you're talking about?
Yeah, yeah. So so the variance is 60.
Right. We had some additional funds. Thank you. We had some additional funds available after we prepared the budget of $60,000 that is above and beyond the 3.4 million base amount.
Okay, so, but the transfers out capital, is that strictly the dollar amount that we've set, that we've collected, that we're setting aside to reserves?
Yes, that's
And then
the
the
R&R
capital
component.
outlay is what we've scheduled for projects to be paid that year. Is that right?
Capital outlay is generally items that are $100,000 or less.
Okay, but that's, okay.
Yeah,
So where in this, oh, because it's a separate CIP budget, that's why.
yeah. You know what?
Okay.
I can change that, transfers out to CIP to
I
make it
would
a little
like
clearer.
that,
Okay.
yeah.
I will do that.
And then when we see the CIP budget, I'm just wondering how much. Well, no, because we're gonna have to look at that CIP budget. We're putting X amount in and we're spending
Yes.
still. Okay, I'm good if you just change it to CIP.
Okay.
And, I'm good. Bertha?
No, I'm good.
Okay, do we have any online questions for the last part of Jeff's presentation prior to going line by line on the draft budget? Okay, nobody in here. Okay, so we're done with our questions. Let's take a quick 5-minute break and then we're gonna go back and dig into the draft
Yes, ma'am.
budget line by line.
Thank you very much.
Okay, break time. We're back from our break and now we're gonna start diving into the actual proposed budget.
Yes, ma'am.
And what we'd like to do is let's let Jeff go through that particular page, then we'll ask questions. And then for online questions, I'll go a few pages perhaps.
Very good. And for brevity,
Uh-huh.
I've never been known for brevity, but the budget handout and the agenda package, we're going to skip pages 1 and 2 because we've already covered that. That's the water
Perfect, okay.
and the summaries.
Yeah, so then what we'll do is we're gonna have Jeff get through a page and then ask questions page by page.
Yes. As
Okay.
soon as we bring up this.
Okay, so we're looking at this or?
Yeah, go to your board packet now.
Uh-huh.
And we're gonna go to page 3 of the draft budget.
Yes,
Okay.
we're going to bring it up on the big screen.
Okay, nice.
Yeah, we're going to need to make it bigger if possible. That works. Okay.
Oh, I found it.
Yeah,
Proposed budget.
what we'll do is we'll create a
Gotcha.
PowerPoint on.
Perfect. And so we'll ask questions around each one,
that. Okay,
after each page, and then
yes,
we'll, for time, I think we'll go through a few pages, if not the water, and then ask questions online and for public comment.
certainly. What we're
So
looking
public
at,
comment, people write down your questions.
thank you. What you're looking here is the water fund budget detail. It covers both revenues and expenditures. And I think this page number, the first page there is revenues, showing the difference in the adopted budget from last year, the first column, the draft budget and the variance and the changes in percentages, which I think Director Cicada, you were kind of asking for that. I don't know how
detail.
much time you want to spend on the revenue side. I think we've talked about that quite a bit.
Well, I'll ask you one quick question. So line number 3, water, sewer, sales, residential, that's the rates.
Yes, ma'am.
Thank you.
That is the rates. So in the detail, we have that.
Gotcha. And on that detail page that I have on the spreadsheet, is there revenue in there as far as other operating revenue goes?
The
I know there's-
detail on the greens,
Yeah, on that
no,
green.
all that's expenditures on.
Just expenses.
Okay.
So, I think further in here, I'm looking at line 16, other operating revenue detail.
Yes,
And those consist of those, third party, fees, and there's an offset on that. There's an expenditure associated with that to offset, and this is the one that we collect about 81%.
that is correct.
So we're spending roughly 19%, or we're paying 19% of those fees.
That is correct.
Okay, and what else is in there besides those?
We provide CPPA power to some other outside entities and they repay us for that.
And that's just a reimbursement. So in theory, is this other operating revenue
It's
all
all reimbursed.
reimbursed? Okay,
Yes.
so, reimbursed. And let me make that note. Okay, Bertha, do you have any questions
No,
on that?
I'm
I
good.
do
All
want
right.
to go down into transfers in,
Okay.
because this kind of breaks down that total number we were looking at.
Mm-hmm.
So we have transfers in of 1,590,000 for debt. Those are the debts we have associated with the water fund. There's the USDA Reach 3A, the AMI AMR project, and also the water CIP loan. So that comes in, those come in from the R&R, what was used to be the R&R funds. It's still coming in from capital R&R fund.
Okay. And I can.
It's kind of
call
like
that
a transfer out
CIP
transfer.
kind of-
Yes, CIP.
Okay.
Now, the one below it is the CIP transfer in. You see that for 641,000.
Uh-huh.
Staff supports these projects, whether it's engineering time or ops time. They track their time, and we want to make sure that if they're spending time on CIP projects, their costs get allocated to those projects. So this is money coming back into the operating fund to reimburse the operating fund for those costs.
Okay, I'd like to have that as a subject on another meeting.
CIP funding,
The, for, charging the funds for labor.
got it. Okay. The water loan transfer and water loan, that's what the money coming in that the sewer fund is paying the water fund, paying down that loan they have. If you look at the transfer in from for operating
Mhm.
for 125, 135, a lot of that was the underground utility crew. Remember, we used to fund it out of R&R funds. We'd move money over to pay for that, with those costs for supplies plus labor.
And where's it coming from now?
It's still part of the operating revenue.
Nice. Okay.
Yes. And then we used to take some money at times from the 108 account reserves to help fund operations. And in this case, that was for some of the water rights work that we were going to do. We don't need to do that anymore in operating because we pulled all
Increase
that
and stuff.
some of that stuff out.
Okay.
So
Okay.
that is a review of the revenues.
Okay. All right. Here we
Next
go.
slide. Now we get into the expenditure side. The top portion of that is salaries and benefits. You're going to see some changes in payouts and comp time, CTO payouts, comp time. With the new MOU, it allows employees to get paid out for their comp time. And so you're going to see, we see more of that, and that's why the number changed. The payouts, that happens under 2 occasions. Employees have the opportunity to do a PTO payout. They accumulate PTO. At the end of the calendar year, they can say, I want X amount of hours paid out for me for this next year, for this year. And so they have to give HR what that payout is going to be, and that includes that. It's also when an employee leaves the district, we pay them for PTO that's been accumulated. So that's what falls into that payouts category.
Finish this page and then I'll come back to questions on that.
Okay. You can see the benefits went up, and that's directly related to health insurance costs. And then the PERS UAL went up. That is a function of 2 years ago. No, I think it's 3 years ago now. 2.5 years ago. A couple of years ago, PERS beat their investment expectations. They brought in 21% returns. Remember when that
Right,
was such a
right.
great year? Well, that took down the UAL costs because they earned more money. This past year, that's part of this valuation, they didn't earn as much money. So the UAL costs went up. So that's just kind of a reflection of the differences in revenues earned by PERS.
And this is I'm going to ask a couple of in this section. So
Sure.
this is the minimum amount that CCWD has to pay for the unfunded liability. This is
Yes.
the minimum.
Now, we do take advantage of a prepayment option. We pay upfront in July, we save 3%.
Yeah.
So,
Okay.
but that is the dollar amount that we owe PERS. on
That's the
UA.
minimum annual. I know you can pay extra at any time.
Now,
and
this is
didn't-
minimum.
So that's the minimum. And so I thought we were paying into some kind of an account to them, and we stopped doing that.
That
What
was
is
the
that?
retiree health portion.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Okay, not the UAL.
Yes. And retiree health, we're going to get a new valuation after the end of this fiscal year. And
Okay.
that will take into account the new programs we have.
Okay. So going to the CTO payouts.
CTO or PTO?
No, it says CTO, comp
Oh,
time
that's
payout.
comp time.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So regarding that, can you tell me a little bit, they get to earn X amount of hours? And, is there a max they can earn, and anything over that is what they take out? Or give me just a little detail on
Okay.
how this program works.
The PTO, the payouts, that's personal time off.
Yes.
That's what we don't have a separate vacation and sick. It's
Mhm, right.
PTO. And I believe it's a maximum of 400 hours of,
Well, give or take, 360, I think.
360, 360.
380 or something.
so if you're above, if you project yourself being above that amount, you can request a PTO payout before you get to that.
But you can only get paid out if you have that max holding, right?
I believe.
I think
Yeah.
for PTO, yeah, like for 2 weeks or something like that.
Yeah, it's the December before the request
Okay.
for a certain amount of cash out, be paid out in September of the next year
Okay.
Have at least what you have requested
on the books.
on the bumper.
Yeah.
Okay. And you have to do that in a timely fashion so we can account for it on our books, for instance, budgeting, because it looks like we haven't budgeted these types of items before.
Well, some of the things, the other component of that is if somebody leaves. And if you have an employee that's been here for some time and has 360 hours of PTO on the books,
Yeah.
they leave, you have to pay them off.
Yeah. I mean, right now, the liability portion of the total amount is on your balance sheet somewhere. which doesn't
Compensated
affect- yeah.
absences.
So it looks like I'm kind of talking about CTO and payouts.
Yeah.
So anyhow, so back to the comp time, that's the one that, folks that only get paid their, 40 hours a week, that's their comp time is what CTO is, right?
If they work overtime, you can get it as
Correct.
comp time or overtime.
Got it. And so this is the one that we're budgeting for that we haven't done before. Is that correct?
Well, it's something that really wasn't utilized much over the years until just recently. So we are now having to budget for it.
And about how many employees does this cover?
Everybody that's hourly.
Really? And this is the max that could be comped out?
Well, some people.
Because I mean,
use-
how do you figure it, you
Could-
know?
Yeah, it is. It's an estimate because some people use comp time for vacation time
Right.
when they, instead of using.
And then they get paid out on their PTO because there is no vacation
Yeah, so,
and sick. Okay, all right, I'm moving on. Bertha, do you have any questions in the salary section?
Oh, no. No.
All right, go ahead, Jeff.
okay. For the first time in several years, on line 55, you see a decrease.
Hmm.
CPPA has lowered their rates.
Right.
And-
That was, yeah, we knew that.
Yeah, so
Uh-huh.
that's something that you'll see.
Mhm.
We can go line item by line item here. Now, this is cumulative for the entire district, not just Damon's budget or anybody else. But in looking at this, service and supplies overall is down 100. If you look on page 6, it's down 174,000.
Why don't we go through this? How about if I pick out some of the things I may have some question on instead of going line by line?
Go for it.
Um,
That's a
so-
good idea.
so telephone, are we certain that's the right amount? Because remember how we've got some kind of data entry error on that
Yeah,
a couple years in a row.
Well, part of it is we budgeted in one location and they ended up being charged to another department. And we have moved telephones out of utilities into non-departmental.
Okay, so you know that this is a good number. We're not going to have to do anything.
No.
Okay. And then on some of this detail that I'm looking for, come on, get in there. So for instance, on material and supplies, we're down. That's good.
Mhm.
And I just want to quickly look at some of the detail. And so unfortunately, oh, it's all by department. So I
Yeah.
could. So if I wanted to go to materials and supplies, how is it in this? Oh, I see it. Give me an idea of what's in there.
Yeah.
And then I can look at this offline. Give me an idea of just some items that would fall in there. Looks like we have a budget of 154.
Yes,
Excuse me,
this-
149.
So you can imagine the construction crew going to Calaveras Lumber and getting material to build a concrete form. And that could also include any number of small items. It could concrete, it could include, say we need to put a fence around X, you could get 5 rolls of barbed wire. So this is going to be district-wide, all crews, pretty much anything you can imagine for any project that somebody might be working on, from the warehouse here, the shop here, out to a pump station or.
So when you order supplies or stuff to stock this place,
Mhm.
is this representative of everything that goes there? Or is this representative for like, oh, we're out on the road or combined?
It would be both. Yeah,
Okay.
but the vast majority of what you would find in the warehouse would be pulled from that GL.
And this would be a good item. I mean, I'm glad to see it's lower, so yay.
Yeah.
But in certain things like this, I'd like to see what our year to date has been over the last, the previous 3 years or something.
Sure.
And I can do that on my own. I don't have to do it today,
Yeah, right.
but just every once in a while, you'll throw some, okay, I got it,
Yeah,
makes
yeah.
sense, kind of a
Yeah,
thing.
yeah.
Yes.
And I mean, operationally, you'll find, Cindy, that's kind of what we do kind of routinely.
Same thing.
Yeah,
Look at those. Good.
constantly pushing up
Yeah,
against.
because you're not going to know unless, you'll know project specific, but if there's certain repairs and stuff, you won't know until it happens.
Right,
And
so
you
the-
look at history.
Yeah, and like the highlights, obviously, this year for us were pumps and motors. We had a huge blow up of the pumps and motors
You got to
GL.
restock
We
those.
had quite a few unanticipated failures.
Yeah.
And so that, remember, there was the mid-year request of taking some of the funds that were set aside for the collections crew to do system improvements and push into that GL. So we could fund that GL because we knew that, we were like,
Yeah.
I think, a third of the way through the year and we had to, rebuild two $30,000, the rebuilds themselves were $30,000 for 2 pumps, so.
And the way you determine projected supplies is you look at your beautiful dashboard and you see where all the repairs and stuff like that are going, and that helps you to make your choice.
That helps, yep, as well as sitting down and looking at basically action documents associated with PSPS. So I can review all of the facilities that we have out in the district and we can say, okay.
And okay, we're gonna work on this section and that
Right,
kind of thing.
right.
Whether it's material supplies, you treat the repair, is there
Any number-
repairs and maintenance on here somewhere too?
We do, yeah.
Yeah, so that would be the same type of thing, using your dashboard to determine, and obviously, the operators input because they're out there, boots on the ground, they know where their problem children are and stuff like that.
Yep, exactly right.
Okay.
And you might, so last fiscal year, you might have had a mini excavator that had a broken door. And this year, the GL was not being hit so hard, so you replaced that broken door. And then 2 months down the road, all of a sudden there was a failure. So it's
Yep.
like a mix of.
You have to
planning-
have a budget to
Right.
pull from, and it's
Yeah.
the best estimate.
And it is definitely our key marker. And I think Bertha referred to this yesterday in the board meeting about, Pat and reviewing,
Yeah.
the claim summary. That is our marker, those expenditures. So it's a mix of planning, it's a mix of where is that current GL? And then it's managing, unanticipated issues, whether it be an
Yeah.
emergency or a storm or all of a sudden, or just a flat failure, something just flat breaks. you know
Yeah.
what I mean? Yeah.
Okay, moving on down, tools. Give me an idea of what tools you're buying this year for 30,000, almost $31,000. Throw a couple out at me. Are they big
Yeah,
tools?
so tools, we're always working to make sure staff has the tools that they need. And we're always replacing failed tools because they actually are a safety hazard. So we're hovering right around the same budget request for tools operationally. I believe there was a slight uptick. So last fiscal, we were at 35,167 and operations requested that just to be $40,000. So that,
In total, but he's looking.
yeah, and so that,
Okay, you're looking at the 40,000.
so yeah, so we should be on, this year we were a little bit over in middle of March when this assessment that I worked on was done, but we were still under budget. Most likely will be right at that line item, but that 40,000 just gives us a little bit more wiggle room so that we can
Hey.
kind of stay on budget.
I'm looking at the green sheet to get an idea of what's what. So when
Yeah,
you're
yeah.
saying tools, it's like wrenches and stuff like that? Are we talking power tools?
All of the
It's,
above.
would it have been that, thank
Yeah,
you. Okay.
anything imaginable. So you can consider that we have.
And so you just looked at your history of what you actually spent to come up with that number. It's not like, oh, I'm doing a line locator this time or
Well, so there's-
jackhammer or whatever.
There's a couple different ways of doing that. So some of those items are actually requesting capital outlay. So if it's a big ticket item, it's going to be a capital.
And how much is a capital outlay? 100,000,
Yes,
over 5,000.
right.
Okay.
So
So
that is
these
that's
are
a
real
side-
small tool stuff.
So yes,
Okay.
that's a sidebar conversation though. But yeah, it could be anything that you could imagine. Could be a drill,
Gotcha. Okay.
cordless drill. It could be a roto hammer. It could be all,
Okay.
a whole blend of all of those things.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
And I'm just kind of curious, materials and supplies, CAL FIRE, what does that mean?
So we're able to leverage a CAL FIRE crew for about $252 a day. We get 12 to 16 inmates, then they'll do work for us. And so one of the ways that CAL FIRE is, the state allows you to pay them is by purchasing equipment that they would then use. And so we actually created a couple of years back, a line item to track that. So that it's just not a black hole of where, you bought 4 weed eaters for CAL FIRE. We can actually trend that and track that.
Okay, so I thought maybe we got some of that work done for free.
No,
Okay,
No, but generally, we have,
it's not labor, it's tools. They do whatever they do on their labor side. if
right,
any.
but
Gotcha.
I would say that, this year it's been kind of unique in that we haven't been able to take advantage of the CAL FIRE crews as much as in the past. And everybody knows the grass is tall this year and we are missing those crews. So they provide a huge benefit to us.
Okay, moving on down.
Can I
Yes, you may.
mention one thing? When you're looking at the green sheets,
Uh-huh.
that's a combined water and sewer budget. So
Okay.
it's not gonna match up
Well,
1-to-1 to the sewer.
Yeah, and it's also departmental, but it'll give me an idea of
Exactly,
what's in.
but I just wanted to make sure that you, as you look at
Gotcha.
that, you
Gotcha.
know the difference.
And then moving down to SCADA radio supplies, what are we talking about here? We're looking at $38,000, a 25,000 increase, give or take?
So yeah, so that's an uptick. That would be one of the highlighted GLs that the operationally we're requesting more money, and that is to buy two-way radios for district trucks and for office staff. So right now we see, I want to say a couple years back, we lost access to one of our radio repeater sites, and this is for communication radios in work
Yeah.
trucks. So we don't have it. And so we were able to take all the equipment that we had there and move it over to Fowler Peak, and we tie in with the sheriff's department there. But in those couple years process, we really have reduced the amount of radio communication that we operate under here. There's a lot of text messaging going on, and we need to return back to two-way
Yeah.
radio comms. And so that's what this request is. This
Okay, so
provides
go back to radios, which when we have an emergency going on, fire and whatnot, do your
Exactly.
phones always work?
no, they don't.
Thank
And
you.
you're exactly
But
right.
the
And
two
so-
ways would.
Right, and and so this is an uptick in that GL, but one of the asks also is to get base stations for the office and handhelds so that, office staff or managers can actually take a two-way home, or they can go out in the field and they can be walking an emergency with a radio and still communicate. And the district doesn't have that capability right now.
Is there going to be an annual, contract charge kind of a thing?
That is-
How much is that?
That would be separate in professional services, and you'll see an uptick in professional services.
And that's going to be
requested as well.
something that keeps on taking.
Well, that would, but basically it's a group rate. Columbia Communications.
Yeah, I was
provides
just
it.
gonna say
It's-
that,
It's
Columbia.
it's kind of like here's the blanket for
Mhm.
45 radios, or it could be
Mhm.
10 radios, it could be 45 radios.
Okay.
It's not so much like a seat
Per radio.
it's not like a Microsoft seat, right? Exactly.
Okay.
Yeah.
Do you know offhand how much that annual fee is going to be?
I believe.
It'll be in
it's-
professional services and
Yeah.
maybe we'll come back
Yeah.
to it then.
Right, yep, yep.
Pumps, motors, I got that. So the admin technology, 78,000. I see that it's less. Thank you. Give me an idea of what we're doing. This is IT stuff I'm thinking and whatnot.
Yes, that is. Yes, that is correct. When you're looking at that, we put in most of the computer cost, that's replacement of laptops, replacement of computers, replacement of hardware, and that's across the board, district-wide on the water side and the sewer side. You're just seeing the water side. And I can go back just one second here.
I'm looking at firewall wall replacements.
Yes,
That's at the
Laptop and-
plants and that helps with our SCADA protection.
right.
Perfect.
So if you're looking at that, that includes the cloud backup for our email, file backup.
What
Some of
about,
the software peripherals and cabling and so forth. So,
but this is out in the operations side.
well, no, it's everything. Remember, this is district-wide. So
Okay.
it's what we do to support each of the different departments. And we do some of that internally.
Does this help, Kelly, remember we went to that cyber and they talked about SCADA. Will this help any of this cost protecting SCADA stuff from cyber attacks?
Some of it
Or is
does
that
when you're
somewhere
looking
else?
at the backup there, yes. But I can act,
Okay, remember we listened to that.
yeah,
In fact, we have that as a future agenda item that we could determine that.
Yeah.
Not in detail, of course.
Yeah.
But you got to plan for ransomware, that kind of
Yeah.
thing. Okay.
but that also, those efforts also show up in computer license and maintenance contracts
Mhm.
when we have virus protection and so forth.
So I see Surface Pro, 10 of them, those are laptops. Who are those going to? I'm assuming Surface Pros are laptops, right?
No, they're a little bit different.
It's a handheld,
It's
device.
kind of a hybrid between an iPad and a laptop. But they're deployed out in field staff. So
Okay.
most of the distribution collections, all those guys
Right.
use Surface Pros, right? Yeah.
All right. And that's how you do your work orders and action reports and everything and keep it all digital.
Correct.
Okay. All right, I'm good on that. Okay, I'm done with that page. Bertha?
I don't have anything. I'm not ready till page 6.
Okay. All right, let's go on to page 5. Service maintenance contracts, I don't like that one. Let me see if I can see what's in here right here. I'm on page 5, item, 101, or line item 101, service or computer license and maintenance contracts.
Right,
We're at
okay.
$206,000 annually, and I think a lot of it is Tyler stuff. I
Yes.
believe I looked a little bit.
That
Yeah,
is
so we
correct.
have,
That includes the internet, that includes Smartsheet, that includes,
it
our
actually
web
looks like it's a little
subscription.
bit more, it's maintenance contracts for things that aren't computers too, like no, that is flow meter, never mind.
So this.
Okay, this is all for operations for the most part.
Well, it's also some licensing for Parcel Quest, for, things
Yeah, I
like
see
that.
Parcel Quest,
CAD, AutoCAD.
Smart
for
Cover
engineering.
licensing, WebSoft. What's WebSoft? Okay, and that's a good one.
Yeah. Service lines. There's a regulatory requirement that's
Oh,
required
great.
by October 14 of 2024. We'll have to tell the state what our customers' service lines are made out of, not our own service lines, but what our customers' service lines are made out of. So they have an application that's going to help us with that. And there's also, you'll see Geotab.
Yeah, what's
Is a-
Geotab?
Geotab is a geolocating application that exists in the trucks that we lease that will tie to our fuel cards. And so it allows, from a safety standpoint, it improves safety because we
You
can.
know where people are?
Exactly. And then at the same time, it'll correlate mileage to a vehicle with your fuel regimen through WEX.
For $200,000, that's crazy.
Not for just that.
No, I mean, there's several things in there,
Oh, yes.
but for just these maintenance contracts, it's like, my goodness, you can't buy anything anymore. They want this annual income.
Yes.
And if you had to get rid of 2 of them, let's say we couldn't do it, any 2 that you could say, okay, we could work around? I had to ask.
Sure.
Got it.
Yeah.
Just for the president.
And what we
Okay.
did too, and some of these are for Parcel Quest and Esri, we went to each department to see how many seats they actually needed, licenses. and we
Good, 'cause
reduced
I
the
asked
number
that,
down.
yeah.
We cut down on some of the numbers of Parcel Quest and stuff.
And this is a summary of all departments, right?
Yes, it is.
We're going through right now.
Um,
So where is maintenance contracts for the computer stuff, for instance?
That would be in your green sheet. Oh,
In engineering, they use AutoCAD. Isn't there
Right.
something, shouldn't that be in here? Do I see it?
it's in there, but you have to go to the engineering department to see that. Department 58.
Oh, man, okay. All right, but still that 200,000 is district-wide,
Yes, it is.
and that does include Tyler.
Yes, it does.
Okay, and that's probably a major portion of that.
That's a chunk of that money. Yes, it is.
What department would that be in?
Tyler, it's 59.
Bertha, if you have a question, go ahead.
Yeah, I'm looking at professional services and you've upped it to $839,000.
Yes, ma'am.
And that's almost a 50% increase. Is that going to be enough? No.
Now, when you look at professional services, if you go to, a lot of that is in engineering, because we have, and I'm
Oh,
not picking on engineering, but in professional services, they are looking at a wastewater ordinance update. I think that was brought up yesterday, and that's going to be about 100,000. We have a master plan update for Arnold Sewer at 150,000. Ebbets Pass Water Master Plan update at 150,000. A water hydraulic modeling for Ebbets Pass at 90,000. So these are all kind of one-time costs that we're going through the process. that makes up a big, huge chunk of it, of what we're looking at
Mhm.
as well. Yes.
Mm-mm-mm. And if this includes engineering, then part of this could also be FERC.
No,
No.
engineering, that has nothing to do with FERC. That would be in the hydro budget.
Oh, okay. All right. Yeah.
And this is where I'd really love to see year to date, you know, the previous 3 years or so, some
Yeah.
way, somehow.
But
Um,
that will not justify the increase in engineering because a lot of these are one-time costs.
Well-
We have to update our master plans and
But see, I would like to know on here somehow, and I'm gonna make my note one-time costs. So it's like, you know, I could see new computer stuff every 3 years, I think it is, something like that.
well, yes, but we rotate people, so you're gonna constantly see replacements. It's not all done, not everybody gets a new laptop the same year.
Yeah,
Right.
That's.
Well, they sh- yeah. What line item were you talking about? Or were you on the same one I was?
Oh, no. I
108
was
professional service.
108, thank you.
Mhm.
Yeah.
So of that 263,000 increase in the water side, let me get to that, back to Department 58. Of that 63,000, 100 of it, 150 is the Ebbets Pass master plan. And then the
Gotcha.
water hydraulic modeling for Ebbets Pass. Between those two, it's 240,000 of
Yeah.
that increase.
Master plan, that's 300,000 in master plan.
Well, one of those is sewer, so that would hit the sewer, the Arnold sewer. We're doing a lot up the hill.
Mhm. And keep it up.
There we go. Yes, ma'am.
The ordinance update, how often do you do that? The $100,000.
This water ordinance is vintage 1984.
Okay, you don't like that?
Well, it's pretty cut and dry, pretty straightforward, but there's a lot of unanswered questions there.
Okay, so,
Ought to be interpreted.
and how often do you normally do, and do you contract that out? How do you
Yeah.
update an ordinance?
Yes, and that is, when you see the dollars there, it's an outside consultant doing.
I guess it would be under professional
We
services.
manage it, but it's done by an outside consultant.
And somebody, obviously a staff would be working with them.
That is correct.
Okay. Fuel, you're keeping the same?
Yes.
Kind of nice.
It's a newer vehicles and operating the enterprise fleet lease to own program is fuel efficiency. And we're
Good.
starting to reap the benefits of that. Yep.
Good. Membership dues. Look at that one.
That includes Aqua, Mountain Counties, East Stand,
CWDA.
all those different ones.
Say, I'm sure you've heard this, underground service alerts have
Mhm.
increased their charges.
Did
for- Yeah, so we put an extra $5,000 in operations. Just because the anticipated uptick in cost, wherever we issue it, USA now, it costs us more money.
Right, well, and you have to have that.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'll not go so in depth yet. I'll do this offline. I'm sorry.
And I'm available by phone.
Right, well,
If you can
because
track me.
I just got this, so I need to have some, okay.
Yes,
And
exactly.
I'll spend some time this weekend, before.
And
but,
you can always send me an email as well with questions.
Yeah. And okay, I'm okay on that page.
Which page are you on now?
I'm moving to page 6. What about you, Bertha?
I'm there already because I'm waiting for
Go ahead, you can ask questions.
state water and sewer fees.
Oh,
Yeah, that's crazy.
That's
yeah. That's one of those regulatory costs that are out of our hands, but
Did we add more? Is it
no,
just?
they've increased their costs,
Yeah.
Cindy.
No, I know, but there's no, I mean, they went that much just by increasing their cost, or do we have more permits added on, or,
it's.
you know what I mean?
Increases, But if you go down to the next line item. under
Damn
other
admin,
than-
oh, it went down.
Yeah, and part of that is pulling out some of those fees into the hydro fund.
Well, we're in the,
Oh,
we're
okay.
okay then.
Right.
So it's,
So,
it's
Yeah.
not that we're decreasing, it's just that we're moving it.
Well, and there's increased costs. I mean, so
Yeah.
you have the.
yeah, but not in such a high amount. That's what was throwing me off. Usually another 1,500 or something like that.
Yeah, well, so it's your NPDES permits, National Pollution Discharge Elimination System.
How many of those do we
We have.
access?
Let's see, 1, 2, 4, I want to say,
And
4 NPDES per.
And do we actually
Three?
discharge water
We
and that's
do-
why we
we
have,
do
or is it
block-
just on hand just in case?
Well, so we have one just on hand, and that is at our Forest Meadows location. We have Copper Cove, La Cantena, and.
What is the
Vallecito.
total for NPDES? Because I hear they're really expensive. I'm wondering, like, do we need one for each one? That's why I was asking, are we actually discharging to use it?
Yeah.
Sounds
they
like it,
play a
but one.
critical role in Copperopolis and La Cantena.
Okay.
So they are the actual, the
Discharge,
mechanism by which we dispose of.
really
treated
pure
water. Yes,
effluent.
absolutely, yeah. And it.
And they go in a
It's not
creek
so-
or not in the lake, I would imagine.
So, in Copper,
I don't know.
in La Cantena, it goes into one of the, decorative ponds on the
Okay.
golf course, and then they use it as they see. fit.
Water,
And
yeah,
Pretty much the same for Copper Cove,
okay.
yeah. And so you can anticipate
And
those.
that requires a permit, but I thought, I mean,
Yes.
don't we treat to title whatever to where it's okay to put it
Yes.
on the grass?
Right, yes.
And you still need an NPDES. I thought those were for, you know, actually putting in a creek, like Angels Creek or something
Well,
like that.
so those, right, yeah, so in the case of copper, right, that would be, it's a recognized wetlands that we're discharging. to. So
Okay.
that's, yeah.
Go ahead, Bertha.
No.
That's great.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, but as you look at the one below it, it's like, oh, well, we came out
Yeah.
ahead.
Yeah.
So, okay, why are we talking about it?
But as I said, all we're doing is moving the money.
Okay, so are we finished with the water detail?
Mm-hmm.
I'd like to see, I mean, I know the vehicle lease is important, you know, but when I see the, you know, almost 400,000, it's like, gosh, where could we cut down?
But,
Is that
uh,
ever gonna start coming down
Yeah, well, this is
to a
something
more, you
that-
know, 100 grand, let's say, instead of this much?
well, if you consider it, we used to buy trucks,
Right.
we would spend that much money on buying maybe
Yeah.
3, 4
Remember the
trucks. If we're getting
vans?
diesels,
Yeah, no, I mean, I know this is a good program
Yeah.
for us, but I'm also looking at, you know, what if we only have this much money to spend? Can we afford to buy new trucks? Can we limp along? I know we have this to work on them and all that. I see the benefit. But is there a point to where, holy cow, maybe we just can't do that this year?
Yeah.
If we just said, you know, that's all I look
Yeah,
at
we're
that
not
one.
just
Is
trying-
that one of those ones that, could we go one more year?
Well, so-
And this goes back to what Cindy is saying. If you give us a cumulative,
yeah,
figure, then
Right.
we have some basis for comparison.
yeah.
Well, I was part of approving this plan. I think
Yeah,
the
yeah.
program is good.
Yeah,
I just, at some point, it's like, you know, when I look at my personal budget, this is all I got.
yeah.
And can I get a new car? I mean, you know what I'm saying?
Yeah, we
It's,
do.
that's all.
Go ahead,
Can
Jeff.
I jump
Yeah,
in here?
take the honors, Jeff.
Yeah.
When we look at the budget for next year and the replacement of vehicles, sometimes you look at a truck and say, you know what? I can use this for another year, but my trade-in value is so high right now. It's worth it because the payout we get for that will reduce the actual cost of our next vehicle. The other component is that's out there is 2027.
The next time that we buy stuff.
Nope. The EV mandate.
Yeah, but that's not gonna.
So what we're trying.
We're all gonna put our foot down, and just say no.
Yeah, yes, but so what we're trying,
Do now.
I
yeah,
know.
so what we're trying to do is position ourselves so that when we get to that point, we have enough of existing vehicles that we can scale back our purchases.
Are we doing EV vehicles right now?
So within this budget request is a study to determine how CCWD would go about deploying charging stations in vehicles. We need to know, we need to have a plan before we can think about.
And that's
Fine,
included in this
like-
dollar amount
The plan is included in the budget ask.
in that
operational
380,000.
Yeah, and so then to Jeff's point, the overall uptick in expenditure for this fiscal for the enterprise program is $17,000. But what that does is a lot like Jeff, the point Jeff made, we can sell umpteen 2019 vehicles that we now own and use the proceeds, the profit from that to pay down the debt on brand new vehicles and bring ourselves ever closer to 2027. So we eliminate 5-year-old vehicles from 2019, and now we have 2024, 2025.
For another
vehicles.
5 years without going electrical.
Exactly right.
Gotcha.
Yes, and so
Yeah.
that,
Okay.
it makes us younger in the fleet.
Right, because
From-
once you
right.
get, you know, a vehicle
EV,
lasts,
yeah.
yeah, 5 years from this date to replace it when it's
Right.
certain age.
Yeah.
So how much of this money is used for a study, a plan?
$30,000.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. Bertha?
Are we on to wastewater now? Do you- Or do
Shall
you
we
have still
open
have?
it up for, let's open it up for public comment, and I'm
Okay.
gonna start in here. Do you have any public comment? 136 of the water fund.
Oh,
yeah.
Okay.
That's the offset thing.
Yeah.
Yes. We pay a fee to Tyler and Global Pay for people who utilize the online payment system and e-checks. And when we started out with this program, we only had a couple months worth of data to help project what our expenditures are going to be for this program. And over the year, we have found that it's costing us about 17,000, 15 to 17,000 a month in fees, I believe. And so this is the cost associated with those fees. It has gone up, but customers are also paying an amount to be able to
Yes.
utilize this.
Yes.
And we're recovering 81% of those fees in the other operating funds, which directly.
So of that 200 and some odd $1,000, 81% of that will be reimbursed to us with income, so it's
Yeah.
not so high. Okay? I've been on that one.
Pardon me? Oh, it is. And
Yeah.
honestly, when we first started this, two things happened after we created the budget. Tyler increased their rates, which we have to absorb, and a lot of people started using it. So when we started out, we weren't seeing a whole lot in terms of actuals because we only had like 2 months of actuals before we projected the budget.
So Jeff, with this 136 item we're talking about, if you go to the revenue side, number 16, the other operating revenue, I believe these third-party processings are in that revenue bucket. Was there something else in that?
Yes, that's reimbursements we get from other agencies for
So this is
providing CPPA, but that's minor compared to the.
right. And so I would like to actually see a number like it says, we're going to collect 184,000. It's 180 of that roughly third-party payment. So then
Probably
we could
about
say,
between 175 and 180, but I can.
all
give you
right,
exact
so
figures.
deduct 180 from that 213 and that's how much we will be paying. And it used to be in the 80,000 when I first started complaining
Yeah.
about it.
Yes,
So it's gone down a lot, but I'd still like to see even Steven that we don't pay anything. You know, the credit card fees, that kind of thing.
Yeah, because, we want to throw in there, and I did this in the beginning, debits. Debits to people's
They're
checking
in there.
accounts,
yeah,
Yeah, but everybody
That's-
charges everything for it, but
Yeah.
I
Well,
say
I know.
mail in the darn check,
anytime you go
save
through the.
yourself some money.
that's
Interchange,
a
they
bunch of
charge
baloney
fees.
as far as I'm concerned.
All
right,
You know,
so-
I can't argue that.
All right, that was your only comment, question? Okay, and he commented on line 136. Okay, let's go online. Do we have any public comment for anybody online? None? All right. Okay. All right, we're gonna move on to the wastewater side real quick.
Yes, page 8 of your handout.
We're gonna bypass the graphs because we talked about them in your presentation.
Yes,
Okay,
And I think when you look at the revenues, it's very similar to what we did and discussed in the water detail.
and this I was asking, and I forget if I forgot to mention it when we were going through the water. If there's some way we can put that year-to-date detail, if you add that one more column somehow, that would be amazing. Even I would rather see the year-to-date detail instead of the adopted budget, because the adopted budget,
It's gone. Yeah.
because it doesn't matter to me.
Mhm.
I mean, it
Yeah.
does. But I think the year-to-date detail would be more important to see where we're actually landing. And you're gonna have that for through April, we're hoping?
Yeah, now yes, through April.
Okay.
And the other part of that too is we can always go back to the budget status report, which has the detail.
I know,
And
but that's
understand
that
But
back
we
and
can,
forth, yeah.
we can look at creating some information. for
And I hate to do more work, but it makes, when I could see, I mean, I wish I could see 3 years and make it in a landscape format,
Yeah.
3 years of previous, so I can see the trend that you guys see, because I probably wouldn't be asking so many questions or pushing hard or whatever, but I'm
Sure.
just trying any way I can, to make sure I do my due diligence to ask at least. But
Understood.
seeing the trend, it would stand out if there's something, and then you could explain why, and we're good. One-time purchases usually.
Sure.
Okay. So revenues all look about this, pretty much just the same, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. Do you have any comments on this revenue, Jeff?
No, I'm good.
No, I do have one comment,
Mm-hmm.
line 17 and 18.
Okay. Power. sale.
Power sales.
You can see it's 0 now.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Those are the revenues
That's moved
going
The
out
hydro.
into
yeah.
hydro.
Mhm.
And interest income, CCWD investments, that's gone. Where's that?
Remember the fund balance in the sewer lot fund?
No.
What is it?
Oh, it's negative.
Doesn't earn any interest.
Thank you. Is that really what happened?
Yep. Unless we charge it negative interest.
Yeah. We owe it interest. In the grant revenue, we didn't apply any kind of grant revenues because we don't know of any. What about the grant revenue from West Point? Did we get
Oh,
all of
that's in
it?
CIP.
Oh, that's
This is
right.
off.
Sorry, a lot
That's
of
okay.
numbers I'm looking at.
The only
Redirect me.
grant revenue we have.
This is only rates for the most part,
Right.
another income.
Yeah,
Yeah, I know.
the only
that.
grant revenue we have in the operating budget is in the water fund, and that's for the O'Dowd's Landing fuel break.
Got it.
And that's because we know we're going to get it.
So like I'm looking at overtime, it's gone down, but over the previous years, how have we done it? We trended down? Is it up, down? Just curious.
It's down. Yeah, it's down.
Nice.
First, yeah, I mean, also bear in mind too, the number of overtime related events that we've had is also down. So, but yeah.
But you're
Jeff
trending
does-
down.
We do, and yeah, Jeff is a whip cracker, so
Yeah.
pay attention to that as well.
Payouts are down. Oh. Okay, revenue's good. Revenue, whatever. Wastewater detail.
So we're on to page 9 now?
Yeah, and it's pretty much the same detail that we already asked about.
Yes,
SCADA
it is.
detail,
Mhm.
admin. Do
Yeah.
you have anything on that page, Bertha? And groundwater monitoring. I'm sorry, I moved on to page 10. Item 82. So we have a budget on that. What are we doing with that budget?
So that, we actually take advantage of an outside firm to do all of our groundwater monitoring for our wastewater treatment facilities.
Oh, is that in the monitoring wells and stuff?
Correct.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
So that's a normal,
That's a normal.
a normal
that's
line item.
Routine line item.
Yeah.
Yep.
When I saw it, I thought of our, or GSM
Yes,
stuff. That's
right.
why I was kind of wondering.
But that's regulatory, it's required.
It is required. It's a regulatory requirement. Yes.
And I'm going down the line, the septic hauling biosolids, that's an annual thing that we do. It's not like biannual or anything. Is that correct? Biosolids every
again?
year. Line 88,
Yeah. So it's a continual.
every year.
Pretty much every week where somebody's
Gotcha.
getting some biosolids.
And are those on the, what are the plants, sewer plants that
So you
treat?
have Arnold, Forest Meadows.
No, I mean,
Vallecito.
what's the process called? I kind of forget. Like we operated a pond at MSD. So what are these ones that have the
Yeah, so-
drying beds and not the drying
Yeah,
beds,
so
but
we
you know
have a
that
couple.
San Andreas has one.
Yeah, a couple different processes, right? So we have a
Mhm.
belt press though, that ultimately.
Oh,
takes
belt
the
press, right.
solids, Squeezes most of the liquid out and then just automatically deposits the solids in a roll-off basin, like a,
Mhm.
you get from the garbage company, you get a roll-off and then it's tarped. And then we work with Gamby, who's right next door here off Churchill Road.
Mhm.
And they will show up at the wee hours of the morning at one of our waste facilities,
Right.
drop an empty off, pick up and grab onto that roll off and bring it onto their truck and drive it all the way down to the Bay
Awesome.
Area.
Yeah.
So soon.
And
So,
Yeah.
what's the county's position on
well, so the count.
Fixing it.
Yeah, right. So there's as you all know, there are many moving pieces when it comes to the conversation of biosolids, and they're not very popular in certain communities within the county.
Right.
However, CCWD has been in the business for quite some time of safely removing and hauling biosolids. It's expensive. And so the ultimate goal is to work with some folks that would be lease holders on a property in West Point, and they would be able to sprinkle our biosolids onto their wood chips in a biomass facility. And the goal for us is to reduce fuel expenditures and costs associated with
Yeah,
dumping
with
those
that.
solids. Yeah.
All right, moving on down to 110 publication subscriptions. It's jumped up to almost $4,000. What are we getting with that?
Again, we talked about that on the water side.
We did?
Yes, that includes aqua, that includes, oh,
No, that's
publication-
membership.
I'm sorry, publication subscriptions.
Yeah.
That is, I believe that's an engineering. We added construction management control software for close to $10,000.
Okay, that's fine. And then moving down to 116, the New Hogan operations maintenance expense. That doesn't go to the hydro thing?
No, it does not. That's what we pay to be able to utilize, that's what we pay to Stockton East for our bill.
Oh,
Yeah,
yes. And I see that amount there. That's gotta be
yeah,
okay.
that's the maintenance side of it.
Stockton. Okay, I'm good on that page. Anybody else? Bertha?
No, I'm through with,
Okay, so I'm moving on to page 11. I put a happy face by the miscellaneous non-operating costs because you're not putting anything in there.
There
Which
we-
I had said, remember, I don't want anything in miscellaneous.
Yes, ma'am.
See, there's some happy faces going on.
Yep.
Anything for you, Bertha, on that next page?
nope.
And I think,
Projects are down.
yes, and I think too, that what you're seeing in the hydro, we've already covered the hydro.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Uh-huh.
exactly. Yeah.
Yeah.
So in that regards.
I think we're,
We've
Done.
gone through this because we've talked about the other slides in the slide
Yeah.
presentation. We talked about debt service, we talked about capital outlay and
Let me-
everything else.
let me see if there's any questions on this. And then I haven't looked at this, but I would like to look at the analysis stuff you have going on. Maybe you could talk to me a little bit. On page 17, there's fund balance analysis.
Oh, yes.
Yeah, we'll talk about that, but let's see if they have any questions on what we just went over in wastewater. Any public comment? Come on up, Mike. Number 21, he's asking for.
Under.
So
either
let me
water or
repeat
sewer.
what it is. So online, so we're
Other-
looking at number 21, other non-operating revenue. It's zero now, right? It because
Right.
yeah, so
Um,
what was that?
Is some of the reimbursements we would get from from NCPA and MID we own the FERC licenses for New Hogan and North Fork. We pay the fees, but
We moved it to
NCPA
hydro.
reimburses us for those fees, and it falls into that category. We can't offset expenses to show a zero line. You have to both show the revenues and the expenditures. So when those revenues come in, when NCPA pays us the check for those, we put it in other non-operating revenue. And we used to have it in the water and sewer lines. It's now moved over to the hydro fund.
Was that it for your questions? Okay, so do we have any online comments or questions for the wastewater portion we just went through?
No, thank you.
All right, is that Mike or Francisco? Hi, Francisco, go ahead.
Thanks. No, thank you. We're good.
Okay.
Thanks.
Oh, good.
He's good.
Oh, I'm
Uh,
sorry.
Page 17, please, under the fund balances.
Page 17. Yeah, give me a brief something on that.
Okay. What we have here is a summary of beginning fund balances for the water fund, Fund 3, for the water funds, for the sewer funds, and for the hydro funds. What revenues we have budgeted, what expenditures we have budgeted, any transfers in, which we went through detail on the revenue pages, any transfers out, which tends to be the in the operating fund, it's those funds that go to CIP projects and use of projects. So it gives you a snapshot of where we project based on the budget, the ending fund balance for the water funds, the sewer funds, and the hydro fund. This was also the same slide on the PowerPoint presentation. I just broke it up into three
Oh,
slides
gotcha. Okay.
instead of one page.
Funds.
I'm stretching.
I don't blame you. I wish I could do it the other way. Sit down. I'm fine. This is the most standing I've done in months.
Oh. Oh.
Well, I
Okay.
think that, I can walk, but that's about what I'm limited to.
Does anybody have any questions on?
No.
Any online questions regarding the analysis, fund balance analysis online?
Yes, how does this play into a calculation of the reserve ratio, the debt ratio?
The debt coverage ratio is actually
I lost you.
yes, I unplugged the microphone.
Gotcha.
You didn't want
It's,
to answer your question?
Keyboard to chair interface error. The debt service coverage ratio is taking a look at operating revenues, operating expenses, the net between the two, and how that compares to debt. It really doesn't factor in fund balance. You would be looking at for this, you'd be looking at the difference between the only on the operating budget, not the CIPs. You'd be looking at the ratio of budgeted revenues less expenses, and then that compared to debt service.
Did
So
you run, did you run a trial one?
Pardon me?
Did you run a trial one using those?
Not at this point, but I'm looking at, it's going to be over 1-to-1 and anything. I don't have my calculator with me, but I'll have those
At
numbers
the next, see where
at the
we're at.
next meeting.
Thank
But
you.
yep,
So see where we're at in the debt ratio after.
yes. And the water fund is where we were experiencing some challenges. If you can see on the sewer fund, it's healthy.
Yes, thank you.
You're welcome.
All right, anything else? Schedule of cash flow water projects. This was just part of what you're
Right.
budgeting for the fiscal year. I think we can go over that as a,
Okay,
as a board. That's just the detail on that, huh?
Yeah.
What about the scenario no rate increase? We did that on your
yes,
presentation.
yes, we did.
All right,
The
looks
only
like we
thing I
went
have
through it.
left is
Mm.
the CIP budget. That's an attachment.
Yeah,
But your board approved the 5-year CIP. It's exactly the same.
it's just the detail stuff too.
Yes, exactly.
Kind of supporting some of those numbers you see in the budget.
Right. And what I'm thinking of doing is in looking at the CIP budget, I'll probably include pie charts to show where
That
the
would be,
funding comes from.
that would be nice.
Okay.
All right, so, thank you. That was great. I look forward to it Wednesday. The same
Thank you.
presentation.
Now,
It's okay.
it'll be interesting. No,
It'll be updated a little bit, not
yeah,
much.
it'll be updated a little bit with a little bit more
The
information,
year to
but
date would be amazing for
I'm gonna
me.
try to consolidate it, but we have 3 other board members that are gonna have to learn that.
Right.
And I know one is not real keen on my long-winded budget discussion.
Well, you're gonna go through, I think if we do the same thing, because it's just budget, like what we did today, I think it'd be really helpful.
But they're not gonna do that.
Well, if they just look to us and they do their homework and talk with you
Yeah.
otherwise and look to us, we could make a
Yeah.
recommendation.
Yeah. And I think the biggest thing is understanding the format. And Director Underhill, I apologize. I knew this in advance. Even I told Michael about it. I go, this is not going to go over too well.
I like it. I like it
You
a lot
liked it?
better than what we've
Yeah.
had. I like it a lot.
Thank you.
And,
It's okay.
yeah, even the line numbers and the detail, it's,
Yeah.
I think it's
No,
good.
no, it's informative and it's information we all need,
Yes,
you
ma'am.
know,
Yeah.
and in order for us to do our jobs.
Right.
Exactly.
Thank you.
All right, let's move on and get out of here. So,
Yes, ma'am.
do you have any other comments, Jeff?
No, ma'am.
All right, do we have a general manager that wants to say anything online?
He's not.
Yeah, I've got about an hour-long report to give.
No, you
if
don't.
That's okay.
Wait, we can't, are you still there,
You guys heard
Michael?
enough? Yeah, can you hear me? Oh, sorry. Yes. Very good.
Go ahead.
No, you guys heard more than enough from me yesterday. I just want to say thank you to Jeff. Great job on the presentation. And all the finance team. Kelly Richards had a big role in this. The department heads all had a big role in this. We didn't even introduce Scott Nelson from Ide Bailey, who's really helped us with this new format. So really, really grateful for the team effort and for the really thoughtful questions from the committee. I thought it was a really good discussion.
I think everybody did a wonderful job and we all pitched in and
And
Did
my
good.
apologies for not recognizing Scott and Kamiko.
is
They
that
did-
somebody that was online?
Yeah,
Hello?
that's Scott. And he's the one that helped.
They've
put
been very
together this
helpful.
new form.
Well, it helpful. Thank you, because I love the format and the reporting. I mean, we could tweak up and get more reports, of course, you know, because again, focusing on some rate study activity.
Now,
But we'll
since
work
this
towards
has
that.
to go out tomorrow in the budget package, there may not be an opportunity to put in some of the requests, like you said, year to date
Year to
within
date.
this budget document, but we may have that available for the PowerPoint.
That's Friday, huh?
Yeah, because the agenda has to go out tomorrow afternoon. And I don't want to get
Well, do
Rebecca
what you
upset.
can, and even if you can get one that we can present with, might be nice too.
Yes, ma'am.
Instead of, you know.
Yeah.
Anyhow, that's fine.
Okay, and I just
Okay.
want to recognize, you know, the entire group that put this together. I mean, you know, a lot of blood, sweat and tears, really.
Yeah, it
And
is.
it was so concise and you were able to answer all the questions and I certainly appreciate that. And
Yeah.
so.
The people behind us did the
Mhm.
majority of the work.
Mhm.
Scott and Kamiko did a lot of the work. Michael and I did a lot of the review,
Mhm.
but I think between all of us, we did I think we did a better job this year than in prior years in presenting the data and the information,
Mhm.
thanks to Scott and Kamiko, and they did a phenomenal job. I'm just looking forward to how we can expand upon this.
Mhm.
Right.
Well, will we ever meet Scott and Kamiko? In
remotely.
person?
Scott's down south.
Oh, okay, I
That's
guess.
okay. We'll just look at you online.
That's right.
Maybe next Wednesday or something.
There we go.
Anyhow, I want to say everything that Bertha said, absolutely. Everybody put in a lot of time and effort, and especially being short-staffed for a while and new employees. And I'm really thankful you guys listened to things I was asking for, and I see that, and I really appreciate that.
Certainly.
So it looks really good.
Thank you.
All right,
Okay.
so the next committee meeting is going to be June 18th, but we will have a budget workshop next Wednesday. We have external relations next Tuesday, I believe.
Pardon me?
We have external relations next Tuesday. I think so. Okay.
Yep.
All right. If there's nothing else, meeting adjourned.
Thank you.
Okay,
12.
and I
Number
just
12.
want to compliment
Yes.